Chapter 1444. Yang Tao was drinking. When he heard his subordinate's report, he spat it out. Fortunately, no innocent people were involved. Are you sure? Lu Shi really used this excuse to send troops? Yang Tao coughed until tears came out. He didn't expect Jiang Pingji to be so cunning. Even the excuse for sending troops was different. Last year, the Tao family rebelled. They sent invitations to Zhangzhou and Wanzhou to sow discord, trying to make the two feudal vassals bristle with anger. The result was gratifying. Yang Tao was not in Zhangzhou but at the front line in Nanxing. Jiang Pingji was clever and didn't fall for it. Her scheme was fruitless. Not only did it cost the whole family, but it also gave Jiang Pingji a ready-made excuse. She was worried that she had no reason to find trouble with Yang Tao. It's enough to send troops. They don't care what the excuse is. His wife, Yan Shuxian, sat next to Yang Tao with the baby in her arms. They enjoyed their rare time as husband and wife. Yang Tao said, "I'm just surprised that Lu Shi put in so much effort to send troops." The baby in Yan Shuxian's arms pounced on Yang Tao. He smiled and took the soft little guy. He couldn't get enough of kissing him. "Husband, do you think my brother's trip will be fruitful?" Yan Shuxian was very worried. It was a long journey to Zhongzhou. She didn't know if her brother, Wang Lin, could successfully convince the feudal vassals of Zhongzhou to form an alliance. Yang Tao said, "Xiaoyang never disappoints. This time is no exception. If he says he's confident, then he's confident." Although Jiang Pingji said she wanted to send troops to war, the preparatory work was very long. Yang Tao was not anxious at all. "Wife, look, the child is still sucking my finger." Yang Tao was playful. Seeing the child holding his finger and sending it to his mouth, he smiled and didn't move it away. Instead, he looked at the baby with relish. Yan Shuxian's mouth twitched. She didn't expect her husband to be so childish. She quickly slapped his hand away. "You're sweaty and stinky. Aren't you afraid that the child will eat something bad?" Yang Tao laughed. "The child doesn't dislike it. He seems to like it. He'll definitely be a great general in the future. Your brain is full of fighting and killing." Yan Shuxian said in a light tone, "I don't like it." Yang Tao had lost his external brain, but he still had to do his work. At most, his efficiency would be lower. Wang Lin knew that in his absence, no one could control the Lord. Therefore, he chose a gentle and generous temporary brain for Yang Tao. Yang Tao was a pure and kind person. If you were to be unreasonable, he would be unreasonable. If you were to be soft, he would not be able to be fierce at all. Therefore, even though Wang Lin was gone, Yang Tao was still under the control of the temporary brain. After teasing the baby, Yang Tao went back to work. There was a pile of information about Nanxing on the table. He casually flipped through it and sighed. Xiao Yang's plans are truly flawless. And Chui's wild ambition really can't hold back. The allied army of Nanxing had completely collapsed. And Chui defeated the feudal vassals one by one, swallowing them up one by one and expanding rapidly. Everyone in Yang Tao's tent panicked when they saw this. This was a good opportunity. Why didn't the Lord jump out and snatch a piece of the pie from Chui? Chui is ambitious. If he doesn't have Lu Zheng by his side to assist him, I'm afraid he won't be able to achieve anything great. Yang Tao muttered, "It's a pity that Lu Zheng is casting pearls before swine. This Chui isn't a wise ruler. He can only share the hardships but not the joys." Chui had hurt Lu Zheng's heart time and time again. The conflict was getting deeper and deeper. If it exploded one day, Lu Zheng would be devastated. The temporary brain said, "Everyone has their own fate." Yang Tao said, "I don't believe in fate." On the other side, because the information was outdated, when Jiang Pingji found out that Wang Lin had secretly gone to Zhongzhou, she wasn't in a hurry to stop him. "You want to fight 2 against 1 again?" Jiang Pingji said, "How long has Zhongzhou been resting?" Wei Xi laughed. "The Nie family of Zhongzhou are not of one mind. It's not impossible for the Lord to fight 1 against 2. Jiang Pingji frowned. She said, "If Zhongzhou gets involved, we have an abundance of troops, but our rations will be very tight. It's better to end the battle quickly. If we are delayed, the situation will be bad." At the end of the day, fighting a war is a job of burning food. Wei Ci said, why not wait for the autumn harvest? Zhongguang has made great progress in his research on fertilizers. They will be used for this year's spring plowing. Jiang Pingji said, yes, I know. Before they could say much, Jiang Pingji received a booklet. It was signed by Sun Wen. Zai Dao. Jiang Pingji was puzzled. Ever since Sun Wen entered her camp, apart from the battle at the northern borderline, he had been rooted in the governance and construction of the northern borderline. He usually kept a low profile. He was obsessed with Sun Wen. Other than his grandson Lan Lan and his work, he didn't care about anything else. Suddenly receiving a booklet at this time meant that there was something urgent. Wei Ci said, maybe he has a request. Jiang Pingji opened the booklet and asked, what request? After reading the booklet, she knew what Sun Wen was asking for. He wanted to apply for a job transfer. He's doing well in the northern borderline. Why does he suddenly want to apply for a transfer? Jiang Pingji was surprised. Wei Ci said, Zai Dao should be for the Nye family of Zhongzhou. If he hears that the Nye family wants to participate in the war, he won't be able to sit still. For Sun Wen, the Nye family was the culprit who caused his family to be ruined and killed. He had to bury his children before him. Jiang Pingji understood and said with a smile, then agree to it. It's time to let Zai Dao have a peace of mind. When she was done with the matters at hand, the sky outside was already dark. Jiang Pingji turned off the streaming room on time and asked Wei Ci to accompany her for her meal. I don't think I asked you about Zai Dao's past? Wei Ci said, my lord, you really didn't ask. Jiang Pingji asked, did he have a grudge with the Nye family in the past? Wei Ci's expression changed instantly. He was at a loss for words. No, Zai Dao was an important member of the Nye family and was highly regarded. I don't know what went wrong in this life, but the Nye family actually hurt Zai Dao's only son. Not only did they break his leg, but they also caused him to die on the way to exile. This also caused a series of chain reactions. Sun Wen's wife passed away due to grief, and his daughter-in-law also passed away. Only the grandfather and grandson were left in the family. If Sun Wen hadn't fled to Dongqing with his grandson, Jiang Pingji wouldn't have been able to find him. This is called the butterfly effect, Jiang Pingji said. Maybe our appearance changed his fate. Wei Ci couldn't be sure. Anyway, it wasn't a bad thing for his lord. Sun Wen received permission. After completing the handover work, he immediately rushed to Xiangyang district in Wanzhou. Sun Lan saw his grandfather at home after school. He suddenly thought he was dreaming. As usual, he flew into his grandfather's arms. Unexpectedly, his grandfather, who was usually amiable, had a solemn look on his face. Grandfather? Sun Lan looked puzzled. He took the initiative to hold his grandfather's hand and found that his fingers were trembling. Lan Lan. Sun Wen said, do you miss grandmother, father, and mother? Sun Lan hung his head and said, I do, but I can't, because grandfather will be even more upset. Sun Wen said, soon, grandfather will personally behead the enemy who killed them. He will peel off the skin and light the sky lantern with daylily. Chapter 1445. Peeling daylily? Lighting the sky lantern? Sun Wen's voice was not loud, but the murderous intent in his words pierced through the eardrums. Sun Lan could not help but tremble. Grandpa. He revealed a somewhat fearful expression. He was too unfamiliar with this sinister and sharp grandfather. Sun Wen restrained his aura and sighed softly as he stroked his grandson's long hair. This child had not yet reached adulthood. He could not be at ease. Sun Lan said nervously, Grandpa, didn't you say that the enemy is from the Nye family? The Nye family? Grandpa, don't mess around. You're my only relative. Grandpa and grandson had depended on each other for so many years. Compared to revenge, Sun Lan hoped that his grandfather could live to a ripe old age. This was more important than anything else. Lan Lan, you're not a child anymore. You're a young man now. Sun Wen said earnestly, if there weren't any major changes in the family, your father and mother would have found a wife for you and arranged a marriage. When the wife reaches marriageable age, you'll be crowned an adult. Sun Lan blushed. He really did not think that much. Grandpa knows that you're kind. If possible, what's wrong with being simple? But birth, old age, sickness, and death, no matter if you're a noble or a commoner, no one can escape this ending. Grandpa doesn't know how long these old bones of mine can accompany you and help you. When Grandpa is gone, what will happen to Grandpa's Lan? You have to know what kind of world this is. It's a chaotic world now. The feudal lords are fighting with each other, and the common people are ants. It's true that the Lord is powerful, but the world is unpredictable. Who can predict what the future will be like? How can Grandpa be at ease? Grandpa, don't say that. You'll definitely live to a ripe old age. Sun Lan said with a smile, I won't let you down. Sun Wen laughed. Grandpa also wants to live to a ripe old age. Not only do I want to see Lan get married, but I also want to see you have a group of children. Sun Lan had been well-fed and well-nourished all these years. He was at the age of growing taller, and the baby fat on his face had gradually disappeared, adding some youthfulness to his appearance. In time, he would become the dream man of many girls in the boudoir. Then the Nye family. Sun Lan's pair of black grape-like eyes were filled with anticipation. Sun Wen said bluntly, Our Lord intends to mobilize troops against Nanxing's Yang Tao. Yang Tao has sent people to seek an alliance with Zhongzhao's Nye family. Grandfather has rested long enough in the northern state these past few years. Even his bones have gotten lazy. It's time for him to come out and stretch his muscles, lest others look down on him. Sun Lan said, Who dares to look down on Grandpa? Besides, it's so hard to go to war and Grandpa is getting old. Just the long march alone was torturous enough for an old man who was approaching his 50s to follow the army. Sun Lan could be considered as the first batch of students of the Golden Scale Academy. Currently, the content of her studies was getting more and more difficult and more practical. The teachers of the academy often offered military and political courses. Military cases from ancient times to the present were picked out one by one and used as teaching materials to discuss and learn with the students. Sun Lan studied very hard, and her grades were basically in the top 10. Occasionally, Sun Wen would talk to him about the situation in the outside world. He understood what he meant and had his own thoughts. There will definitely be a battle between the Nye family and the Lord. Grandfather won't be able to sit still when his enemies come knocking on his door. The old man was old, but he was not so old that he could not move. The reason why I volunteered to be transferred back was not only to avenge your grandmother and parents, but also for you. Sun Lan said dejectedly, Grandfather dotes on me and always plans for me, but I also hope that Grandfather can. Sun Wen felt that he did not make himself clear enough and explained, Grandfather sees that you are close to the eldest daughter of Qiguan Wenjing. Qiguan Rang is the Lord's confidant, and you lost your pride when you were young, so your status is much lower than his. Since ancient times, marriage is about matching families. If Grandfather doesn't fight for you, do you want to rely on yourself? When you work hard to climb up, Qiguan Jingwei's daughter can even call you uncle. Sun Lan's face turned red, as if he had applied a thick layer of rouge. Sun Wen looked at him and said with a smile, Tell Grandfather honestly, do you like Qiguan Wenjing's daughter? Sun Lan was extremely shy, and he timidly moved closer to his grandfather's ear and whispered, I like her. She's very pretty, and she's a good person. Sun Wen took the opportunity to say, If you like her, not only will Grandfather have to work hard for you, but you have to work hard too. Sun Lan said innocently, Isn't it all about fate? There was a saying in the books that a marriage of 1,000 miles was linked by a single thread. Wouldn't they be able to tie the knot if they liked each other? The corner of Sun Wen's mouth twitched. His grandson was more innocent than he thought. Fate? Even if your fate with Qiguan Jingwei is as thick as your thigh, do you believe that Qiguan Rang will take a knife and chop your fate into pieces if you are not worthy of her? Which father would be willing to hand over his beautiful daughter to a son-in-law who is inferior in every aspect? Qiguan Rang did not easily offend people, but when it came to his daughter's marriage, this person was as difficult to deal with as a hedgehog. If Sun Lan did not have a bit of ability, he would not be able to surpass Qiguan Rang. Sun Wen had been too low-key these years. Even though he had made great achievements in governing Bay State, northern borderline, his sense of existence was not as good as a few young people who were active in the front lines. He had tried to sound out Qiguan Rang, but the other party did not say anything and only responded with a cold snort. Sun Wen had an idea. Sun Lan tugged at his sleeves and said pitifully, "I'm not that bad." Sun Wen said, "Of course I'm not bad, but I'm still far from Qiguan Wenjing's standards. He won't give in so easily." If they got married in the future and Sun Lan still had such a soft temperament, it would be strange if Qiguan Rang would treat him well. If Sun Lan did not fancy Qiguan Jingwei, Sun Wen would not have worked so hard. If he worked harder now, he would be less difficult when he proposed to Qiguan Rang in the future. Sun Lan was speechless. He felt a little hopeless. After a while, Sun Wen asked him, Lan, do you want to follow Grandpa and train with the army?" Military life was the best way to hone people. He did not expect Sun Lan's temperament to change drastically, but at least he could be more resolute. Sun Lan pointed at herself in surprise. "Can I do it?" He was still a student of the Golden Scale Academy. Would the headmaster let him go? Sun Wen said, "It's naturally possible for Grandfather to beg the Lord. But when we get to the army camp, Grandpa won't be able to take care of you at all times. The army camp is not like home. You have to be mentally prepared for whatever difficulties you might encounter and suffer. Don't complain about being tired." Sun Lan shook his head and said, "I'm not afraid of suffering." After the conversation between grandfather and grandson, Sun Lan could not sleep that night. The next day, he went to the academy and could not help but tell Qiguan Jinghui everything. Of course, he did not say that he liked her or that Grandpa wanted her to be the Sun family's granddaughter-in-law. He only said that he was going to follow the army for the sake of training. Qiguan Jinghui said, "Why do you suddenly want to go to the army camp?" Sun Lan said embarrassedly, "Maybe Grandpa thinks that I'm too soft and can't stand up. It's good to go to the army camp and see the world." Qiguan Jinghui asked him, "What about the academy's curriculum?" Chapter 1446. Qiguan Jinghui said, "Marching to war is not child's play. You have to go through all kinds of barren hills and unruly rivers. Can your body handle it?" Sun Lan's equestrian archery was not very good. His level was below average and his physique was also weak. Marching to war could really kill people. Grandpa sent me to the military camp to gain experience. Most of the time, I will be a clerk and help out. He won't let me carry a sword to the battlefield to kill the enemy. It's not that dangerous." Sun Lan smiled shyly. "There is still a long time before the war. I will find a martial arts master to learn more." Qiguan Jinghui smiled. "There is no need to be so troublesome. I can practice with you." The Golden Scale Academy was divided into male and female classes. The morning classes were the same, but the afternoon classes were different. The boys learned equestrian archery, while the girls learned physical training and needlework. Generally, the former was emphasized. The needlework level only needed to be at the level of showing a purse. As for physical training, many people's understanding was superficial. They all thought that it was a dance that was mainly for watching and training. Sun Lan was no exception. In the end, Sun Lan's sword was knocked out of his hand for the 10th time. The pain made his eyes red. Qiguan Jingwei's sword was not only powerful, flexible, and fast. Before he could blink, the sword was already close. Not only that, he also found that the other party's strength was terrifying. It completely subverted his inherent impression of a little girl. But Jingwei looked so delicate and small, maybe Grandpa was right. "Very painful? Look at you, your eyes are already watering." She put down the wooden sword and went forward to grab his hand. Qiguan Jinghui carefully examined his red palm. She felt a little guilty. She practiced too much with her classmates and the female soldiers and martial arts masters. She forgot to be careful. Sun Lan shyly withdrew his hand and unnaturally covered the area between his thumb and index finger with his sleeve. The skin that was touched by her was hot. "No, I didn't sleep well last night. I'm a little sleepy now. It's not that I want to cry because of the pain." "Okay, I'll believe you." Qiguan Jinghui did not suspect anything. Coincidentally, a maid brought dinner to the two of them. Mother and two younger sisters, have you eaten? Before eating, she casually asked her mother and younger sister. The ancients did not have safe contraceptives. Qiguan Rang and his wife loved children. Qiguan Jinghui gave birth to two more girls. Currently, there was still one in her stomach. Qiguan Jinghui hoped that it would be a younger brother. This was because she had overheard the maid say that her father was middle-aged and did not have a male heir. Madame did not allow Rujuan to marry into her family, so he was under a lot of pressure. Growing up in this family, Qiguan Jinghui didn't feel the importance of having a male heir. When she learned about the customs of the outside world, she wasn't so sure. Even though her parents had a good relationship with each other and there was no conflict between them, Qiguan Jinghui still hoped to have a younger brother so that her mother's pressure would be less. Outside, there were many examples of the legal wife not being able to give birth to a son of the first wife, and the husband taking in Rujuan. She didn't want to have an eyesore between her parents. Even if she couldn't give birth to a younger brother, it didn't matter. In the future, she would set up a female household to look for a husband. She definitely wouldn't tarnish her father's reputation. Little did they know, Qiguan Rang hoped that his wife's child would be a princess. After all, he had made a wish for a dozen daughters. Sun Lan and Qiguan Jinghui were about the same age. As a boy, Sun Lan should be taller, but that was not the case in reality. In the past 6 months, Qiguan Jinghui had grown very quickly. When the two of them stood together, Sun Lan was still half a head shorter than her. However, the elders said that girls grew fast at this age. In another 2 years, it would be Sun Lan's turn to grow taller. He definitely wouldn't be short. Sun Lan was relieved. He didn't want to be a dwarf. After the meal and tea, Qiguan Jinghui suddenly asked, "Did Mr. Sun give you a courtesy name?" Sun Lan replied, "I haven't turned 20 yet. It's still too early to give me a courtesy name." Because of the ways of the world, many people had a courtesy name without being crowned. Sun Lan was still too young, so Sun Wen hadn't given him a name yet. Why did Jinghui suddenly ask about this? A few days ago, I heard Changsheng call him Brother Rongli. After asking, I found out that it was a courtesy name given by Elder Fengyi. Fengyi, courtesy name Rongli? Sun Lan was looking forward to it. What courtesy name would his grandfather give him? He was deep in thought when Jinghui said, "Last night, I heard father and mother talking. It seems that Fengyi is going to be engaged to Changsheng." Sun Lan was supporting his chin with his hand. When he heard this, he almost slipped. Engaged? How old is Changsheng? Fengyi was a little older than Sun Lan. It was normal for him to be engaged, but his partner was too young. The two families are happy to see it happen. There's nothing bad about it. Engagement isn't marriage. At least it has to wait until Changsheng reaches the age of 15. By then, Fengyi will be an adult. Qiguan Jinghui was not surprised. After all, Fengyi had a good reputation. A group of elders also thought highly of him. Even Feng Jin couldn't find fault with him. The two families should be engaged first. If there were any changes in the process, it wouldn't be a big deal to cancel the engagement. Sun Lan said embarrassedly, "I just think it's too early." Jinghui said, "It's most likely true. Didn't you notice that Changsheng's name on her nameplate has changed?" Sun Lan naturally didn't notice. Changsheng's original nameplate was Feng Changsheng, but now it was changed to Fengyu. Changsheng was used as a courtesy name. If the two families wanted to be engaged, although the process was not as complicated as marriage, it still required the names of both the man and the woman. The next day, he went to the academy to ask Fengyi and got a positive answer from him. Sun Lan was speechless. In a moment of carelessness, Fengyi actually quit the singles alliance. Why so sudden? Sun Lan hadn't heard anything about it before. Even though there were signs, Feng Jin had never relented. Fengyi said, "Changsheng stayed at the Feng family for a while at the beginning of the year. You know that people often visit their relatives and friends at the beginning of the year. The Feng family is also a big family, so naturally, someone has their eyes on Changsheng. It's said that he's the grandson of an elder who married out. He's of noble birth and has frequent contacts with the Feng family. Because the elders of the two families had a complicated relationship, Feng Jin couldn't reject them outright, so he could only ask for help. In the end, Feng Yi got a bargain. Feng Jin and Feng Zhen already had a verbal agreement. Now that they were engaged, it was just a written agreement. In the afternoon, Feng Yi found out that Sun Lan might be going with the army for training. He looked thoughtful. As soon as he got home, Feng Yi told his father about his plan. Feng Zhen said, "You want to go to the battlefield when you're not even fully grown?" Feng Yi said, "No matter how much you read, you won't be the next Zhao Kuo if you don't put it into practice. Why do you suddenly have this idea? You've been provoked by Sun Wen's grandson, so you insist on competing?" Did he really think that it was so easy to survive in the army? Feng Yi's eyes were calm, but Feng Zhen felt that his son was rolling his eyes in his heart. Sun Lan has Sun Lan's strong points. I have no intention of competing with her. Feng Yi just felt that what he learned in the academy was enough for now. As to how to use it flexibly, he still needed to put it into practice. What was written in the books and reality were always different. Chapter 1447. Although Feng Yi was still many years old, he had always been calm and considerate. He was the most reassuring. Since he took the initiative to ask Feng Zhen to enter the military camp to gain experience, he had naturally thought it through. His stepmother, Wan Xiao, did not agree. Not only did she not support him, but she also glared at her husband. Listen to what this person is saying? Life and death are fated, don't blame others? Feng Yi was the only child of the old Feng family. Feng Zhen's body was weak and it was difficult for him to have children. If something happened to him, how could he answer to his ancestors? This father was really cruel. He was willing to throw his 12 or 13-year-old son into the army. Wasn't he afraid that Feng Yi would never return? Feng Yi naturally understood Wan Xiao's good intentions. But, father, you are weak. Because of this, I have to shoulder the heavy responsibility of revitalizing the family. Wan Xiao sighed softly. Even so, Rongli, you are still too young. Even those big and burly men can't stand fighting in the army, let alone you. If you really want to gain experience, why don't you wait a year or two, when you are a little older? Feng Yi pursed his lips and did not speak. He only shook his head and firmly rejected his stepmother's suggestion. Seeing this, Wan Xiao could only give up. Out of the corner of her eye, she caught a glimpse of her husband Feng Zhen's half-smiling face. Instantly, she was furious. She secretly reached out and pinched the flesh around his waist. It hurt so much that the smile on Feng Zhen's face cracked. Seeing his reaction, Wan Xiao's anger subsided a little. Feng Yi's matter quickly reached the ears of his future father-in-law, Feng Jin. The latter snorted and did not comment. He did not react, but Changsheng, who was sitting at the side doing her homework, could not sit still. Feng Jin said, "Is there an embroidery needle under the mat? Sit properly, don't fall all over the place." Changsheng put down her brush and stared at her father. She asked, "Father, did you say that brother Rongli is going to the military camp?" Our little Changsheng feels bad? Changsheng said, "No. I just heard the maid mention that the battlefield is very dangerous. Brother Rongli looks thin and small." Feng Jin could not help but chide his daughter with a smile. Father's silly daughter. If the eldest son of the Feng family does not go and gain experience, what right does he have to marry my precious daughter? Feng Jin was happy to see this happen. How could a young man grow into a reliable man if he didn't go through real-life experiences? He would rather raise his daughter for the rest of her life than hand her over to an unreliable man who would harm her for the rest of her life. Swords and sabers have no eyes on the battlefield, but he's not going into battle. He's just studying in the camp, so there's not much danger. Feng Jin decided to let Feng Yi and Changsheng get engaged because he saw that the lad had a promising future and a reliable character. He was worth entrusting his daughter to. Otherwise, with the foundation and status of the Feng family, what else could Feng Yi have that was worthy of his attention? Feng Jin didn't care about his colleague's social status, but it was different for his son-in-law. If it wasn't for the Lord, Feng Yi's background wouldn't have made it onto Feng Jin's list of candidates. Marriage was not just about two children falling in love with each other. The background and upbringing of the two families had to be taken into consideration as well. Feng Yi could barely be considered to have been born into a landowning family, but his family had long been in decline. By Feng Zhen's generation, there were only a few family assets left and not many connections. If it weren't for the chaos of the world, Feng Zhen's line of descent would most likely be in dire straits. How would they have the right to become in-laws with the noble Feng family? Feng Zhen was highly valued by the Lord, so his future would not be too bad. Feng Yi had been steady and intelligent since she was young. She could barely be considered a child that everyone had watched grow up. Feng Jin was well aware of this child's character. Feng Jin reluctantly approved of Feng Yi after all these conditions were added together. Feng Yi took the initiative to ask for experience, so he had a higher opinion of him. Feng Jin said earnestly, "You're still young, so you don't understand these things. When you do, you'll understand my painstaking efforts." Changxing nodded and said, "Yes, but father, can I?" Feng Jin smiled bitterly and said, "You haven't grown up yet, so I can't keep you. Go, remember to come back early to do your homework." Changxing brought 2 maids to visit Feng Yi's house. When Feng Jin saw this, his heart felt suffocated. "Madam." Feng Jin felt a little suffocated, and he didn't let go of his wife's hand. Give birth to a boy this time, don't want a daughter." Feng Jin squeezed out 2 words after a while, "My heart aches." His daughter was so cute and likable, why did she have to marry someone else? Feng Jin said, "It hurts as if someone has gouged out my heart." Wei Jingxian couldn't help but laugh. She didn't expect her husband to be so childish. It didn't take long for Jiang Pingji to hear that Feng Jin and Feng Zhen had become in-laws, and the children of both families were engaged. She held her pen in a daze for a long time, then said after a while, "Children nowadays are really amazing. This is definitely puppy love among puppy love." She was dealt a blow, and the salted fish in the streaming room wasn't any better. Tudu Feiqiu. If I remember correctly, Feng Jin's Changxing was delivered by the streamer, and they're engaged in the blink of an eye. Yao Yingyun, Changxing, who just entered the 1st grade of primary school, and Feng Yi, who just entered the 1st grade of junior high school, are engaged? Don't the university students and the working people feel heartache? Why are you watching the streaming? Do you have a boyfriend? Have you found a girlfriend? You're a dog that weighs more than 100 pounds, how can you still be single? This streaming room is too unfriendly to single dogs, so smile and say goodbye. Emma Yokwai, my heart hurts, old friend. Even primary school and junior high school students are in love. How can single dogs like us, who have been watching the streaming room all year round, survive? Jiang Pingji also felt heartache. She sighed and said, "Zixiao, aren't you worried?" Wei Ci looked up at her from a pile of documents, blinking in confusion. Worried about what? About the expedition against Yang Tao? Jiang Pingji rested her chin on her hand and said, "Aren't you worried that our children will be the same age as Feng Yi's children?" Wei Ci said calmly, "If Feng Yi didn't drown and die young in the previous life, Feng Yi would be 18 when Feng Yi was born. In other words, Feng Yi's children would really be the same age as Jiang Yan." Jiang Pingji said, "It's a pity that Feng Yi died in the previous life." Wei Ci said, "Zisher's Hanshi powder acted up, and Feng Yi hurriedly found a servant to call for a doctor, but he accidentally stepped on the moss on the stone steps and slipped into the pond. Even though the servant saved him in time, Feng Yi's body was weak, and he fell seriously ill after falling into the water, and he died within a few days. Zisher brooded over this for most of his life, and in the end, it was better to have Feng Yu. According to Zisher, Feng Yu's appearance is 50% similar to Feng Yi's." At this point, Wei Ci paused and recalled Feng Yu's appearance in the previous life. He said again, "Their appearance should be quite similar, but Feng Yi is dignified and serious, while Feng Yu is warm and gentle and smiles whenever he meets people. Each has his own charm." Jiang Pingji was curious about her future son-in-law. After inquiring about it in detail, Jiang Pingji couldn't help but sigh. The thing that Feng Zhen is most proud of in his life isn't his achievements, but the 2 sons he gave birth to. He even gave birth to 7 or 8 children, but all of them added up are not as good as his 2 children. It's really infuriating. Chapter 1448. Until Wei Ci committed suicide in front of the palace in his previous life, he did not know how the future young Emperor Jiang Yan hooked up with Feng Yu. Feng Yi from Feng Zhen's family seduced Changxing at such a young age, and Feng Yu made a vow of love with the crown princess without saying a word. Were these things passed down from generation to generation? Wei Ci felt uncomfortable at the thought. His expression turned paler and paler, and his brows were furrowed so tightly that they could squash flies. Jiang Pengji said, "Zixiao, did you think of something bad?" Wei Ci said, "The young emperor made a vow of love with Feng Yu when he was of age. Now that I think of it, I still feel unhappy." However, Wei Ci's identity meant that he could not use his father's identity to make things difficult for Feng Yu. He could not even overreact. The emperor also turned a blind eye to their private relationship. Wei Ci was worried that the young emperor would be hurt, so he had insomnia. "Does your highness know what the outcome would be if you chose Feng Yu? With Feng Yu's looks, he will definitely be an important official in the court in the future. How could he? He made a promise without permission when he was young. What if he regrets in the future?" At this point, Wei Ci could not continue because he thought of himself. Jiang Yan did not even frown as she marked the memorials. "Grand Tutor, you think too much. I am the future ruler of the world. Do I have to be restrained by a man? It is enough that both parties are in love. What else does Feng Yu want? One day, if he really has a change of heart, I will secretly grant him a death sentence. The secrets of the royal family and the dignity of the emperor cannot be tarnished. Only the dead can keep their mouths shut." Wei Ci was stunned for a while and asked, "Is he willing?" Jiang Yan asked doubtfully, "Why not? Behind the scenes, he is the emperor's man. In front of others, he is the second son of the Feng family. He is an important official who holds great power in the court and is deeply favored by the emperor. There are gains and losses. He has to give up some things to get everything. For example, the inheritance of the clan, a normal marriage. If not, I will give him a male heir in the future and secretly bring him back to inherit the clan. The court today cannot tolerate so much willfulness." Perhaps it was because she grew up in such an environment. Jiang Yan accepted it without any resistance. She was the uncrowned young empress, so the country, the imperial court, and the people were her main focus. Romantic relationships were not as important. Jiang Yan knew that this would be a grievance for Feng Yu, but as she said, she did not lose anything other than a proper title and marriage. Wei Ci asked her, "Feng Yu agreed too?" Jiang Yan said, "He took the initiative to mention it to me. I feel that this person is very tactful and has been my study companion since I was young. It's good to know him well. Since he was going to have children anyway, why not find someone who was pleasing to the eye, tactful and helpful? At the very least, I don't need to get to know him." Wei Ci sighed. Compared to his father, Feng Yu's ability to read people's minds is superior to his father's. She had seen through Jiang Yan's thoughts. She had taken the initiative to make concessions and sacrifice herself in exchange for a favorable impression. "I like to deal with smart people. Feng Yu is very sensible, so you don't have to think too much. There are too many deceptions in the imperial court. It's rare for someone to be willing to be honest with me. This feeling is quite refreshing." Jiang Yan said calmly, "Grand Tutor, you don't have to worry that I'll be at a disadvantage. No matter how clear Feng Yu is about Gu's thoughts, it was Gu who allowed him to see it. He can't do it." Wei Ci did not know what to say. He looked at Jiang Yan with a complicated and deep gaze. Strangely, he felt a trace of sympathy for Feng Yu. Jiang Pengji listened to Wei Ci's recount and patted his shoulder. "Even though that child is telling the truth, I still feel that you've been stabbed in the heart several times by her." Wei Ci was speechless. Thinking back carefully, young Emperor Jiang Yan's words were indeed quite heart-wrenching. Jiang Pengji said, "I'm looking forward to this, Jiang Yan." Wei Ci said, "I didn't fulfill my responsibility as a teacher and a father." When she was young, she loved to smile, but as she grew older, she became more and more expressionless. From her marriageable age until Wei Ci's death, he had never seen her smile again. Jiang Pengji laughed heartlessly. Different identities, different ways of living. If not, How can we keep the demons and monsters in the imperial court under control? I heard from you that the political situation in the early years of the Jiang dynasty was quite grim. Young Emperor Jiang Yan has only inherited the throne for a few years. If he didn't harden his heart, the imperial court would have long been in chaos. It seems that Wenjing, Zishur, and the others are still waiting for long periods of time. The little emperor is under a lot of pressure. Wei Ci thought about it and could not help but sigh. You're right, my lord. His way of education was indeed a failure. He intended to teach Fusho to become a famous scholar who lived like a cloud and a wild crane, but in the end, he made a grave mistake. According to his way of education, once young Emperor Jiang Yan was taught to study and be inflexible, how could he sit firmly on the throne? When the two of them conversed, the entire streaming room was silent, as if everyone's computer had crashed. If not for the fact that the avatars of the audience were all lit up, Jiang Pengji would have thought that the streaming room had been shut down. Tudufeichio, oh my god, what did I hear? Porcelain Beauty, did he just say that it was his previous life? Wenmie Kangshi, it's a lie, right? Zixiao actually used the script of a reborn person? Kojiao Qifan, there's so much information in today's streaming room. I was so shocked that my brain froze just now. Zixiao is actually a reborn male protagonist? No, as a reborn male protagonist, shouldn't the correct way to be reborn be to take advantage of the opportunity to recruit troops and conquer the world? The script is not right. The 500 salted fish were all confused. According to Wei Ci, the streamer was also an emperor in her previous life. The streamer also had a daughter with Wei Ci, and this daughter was the future empress. She also seemed to have the style of a cold and aloof older sister. Everyone couldn't help but shake their heads to check if their brains were filled with water. Yen Rian, Manual Det. Beauty Zixiao, as the male protagonist, ended up using the script of a reborn female protagonist. In his previous life, he was depressed and failed to achieve his ambitions. He committed suicide in front of the palace and died tragically. After his rebirth, he worked hard and turned over a new leaf. He tried his best to cling to the female protagonist's thigh and make up for his regrets. He held the streamer's little hand and walked to the peak of life together, leaving his name in history. Oh my, this plot is so girly that it's been written too much. Digaman, what does this mean? This means that Zixiao, as a man, has the heart of a little princess. Otherwise, how could she be the female protagonist? Minmin Erkshu, I always thought that the streamer was Mary Sue, but the streamer is actually Long Outyan, vomiting blood. The salted fish expressed that today's bends were especially scary. A group of experienced drivers all crashed at the bends. Buqian Yaikosanian, Jiang Outyan x Mary Wei, I'll eat this couple. I'll eat it with tears in my eyes. Not to mention that Weibo was flooded again. Jiang Pengji was in a particularly good mood when she saw the contents of the bullet screen. The time they spent together was exceptionally short. Jiang Pengji began to busy herself again. The battle preparations were nearing the end. She only had to wait for the flag to be raised and the army could set off for the battle. In another place, the travel-worn Yen Lin finally met the current head of the Nye family, Nye Liang. Chapter 1449. Yen Lin's trip to Zhongzhou not only brought Yang Tao a powerful ally, but also affected the balance of power within the Nye family. In order to train his eldest son, Nye Qing, Nye Liang didn't do it himself. Instead, he let his son do it for him and successfully facilitated the alliance between the two families. In order to live up to his father's expectations, Nye Qing had been racking his brains and hadn't had a good night's sleep. Despite his pure and kind personality, Nye Qing wasn't stupid. He had completed the task his father had given him perfectly, and the officials who were loyal to Nye Liang had a whole new level of respect for him. From that day on, Nye Qing didn't have much time to read poetry anymore. He spent most of his time at his desk working on government affairs. When he finally had time, he immediately went to his cousin, Nye Yang, to complain. Nye Yang saw him and said sourly, I was looking for you a while ago, but I couldn't find you. Why did you suddenly come to see an old acquaintance? Nie Qing had lost a lot of weight recently. He thought that Nie Yang was really angry and quickly tried to defend himself. Yang, don't be angry. I didn't want to see you. I was so busy that I didn't even have time for my meals. Nie Qing said bitterly, Yang didn't know. I don't know why father has been leaving me to deal with these days. In order to live up to father's expectations, how could I not take it seriously? I've been so busy that I've neglected Yang. I'm here to apologize. Nie Yang knew when to stop and his expression softened. He didn't have the sourness from before, but instead showed some concern. It's a good thing that uncle entrusted you with such an important task. Why are you apologizing? Seeing this, Nie Qing's expression relaxed again. His cousin was just this kind and understanding. Actually, I'm here to ask for Yang's help with something. Nie Yang said self-deprecatingly, I don't have much ability, but if there's anything I can help you with, I won't refuse. Nie Qing said, I don't have anyone I can rely on. Yang, are you willing to be my right-hand man? Nie Yang had no reason to refuse this invitation. He couldn't have asked for more. As time passed, Nie Yang and the system realized that Nie Liang had been modifying and cultivating the firstborn. The system couldn't sit still anymore and bombarded Nie Yang's ears. You're really not anxious at all. Nie Liang is planning to pave the way for his son. Nie Yang picked his ear and said leisurely, anyone who isn't blind can tell. Nie Liang did not have much time left. If he did not correct his son's temper, even if Nie Liang cleared the obstacles for his son before he died, Nie Qing would not be able to hold on. What do you call that? The emperor is not anxious, but the eunuch is. If Nie Liang wants to train them, then let him train them. We just have to quietly wait for Nie Liang to die of illness. There's no need to play any tricks. After saying that, he took out a roll of bamboo slips and read it carefully, as if he was engrossed in reading the books of the sages. The system was rendered speechless by him. Everything about its host was good except for her temper, which gave it a headache. She often refuted its opinions. For the system, a host that was too opinionated was not a good thing, because it meant that it would be difficult to control. The temptation of power is too great. At the same time, it can change people beyond recognition. Do you think that Nie Qing can still be controlled by you after gaining power? The system could not help but scare Nie Yang, but Nie Yang was unmoved. Are you that confident that you can control Nie Qing? Don't I still have you? Nie Yang rolled his eyes. Even Nie Liang fell for it, let alone Nie Qing. The system was stunned by his words. Why was this shameless attitude so hateful? At this time, an extremely heavy orange cat struggled to climb up the window ledge, and fell to the other side with a meow. Nie Yang's eyes flashed with a hint of a smile. He reached out to the cat and called out softly, Cat, come here. The orange cat shook its head, meowed, and obediently passed its paw to the other party. Nie Yang hugged the extremely heavy orange cat in his arms, his fingers running through its fur as he skillfully stroked the cat. The orange cat initially resisted, but after a while, it comfortably closed its eyes. Seeing this, the system could not bear to watch anymore. Nie Yang, are you such a cat lover? Help this damn fatty lose weight. If he gets any fatter, he'll be in trouble. Because the servants around him were all sent away, Nie Yang did not need to answer in his mind. Instead he smiled and asked, Is it very heavy? The system complained. 9 out of 10 orange cats are heavy, and one of them is extremely heavy. Nie Yang continued, So what if it's heavy, I can still raise it. While the two of them were talking, they did not notice that the orange cat was looking at Nie Yang's chin from a tricky angle. Forget it, I'll ignore this dumb cat of yours. Nie Yang hugged the heavy orange cat in his arms again, preparing to go out for a walk. My cat doesn't need you to care. The orange cat was in low spirits, so Nie Yang used his finger to scratch the cat's chin and whispered a few words. The cat arrogantly turned its head away. Stop throwing a tantrum. Go out and play, remember to come back early. Nie Yang smiled as he put the cat down. After the orange cat landed, it shook its fur and walked unsteadily, as if it was drunk. The orange cat disappeared into the garden, probably to catch butterflies and flowers. Everyone knew that Nie Yang indulged in playthings and kept an extraordinarily fat orange cat by his side. Many people mocked him for his poor taste. Nie Yang was unmoved. Instead, he doted on the cat more and more. All the expensive flowers in the garden were the cat's toys. It could be seen that the orange cat could be considered a tyrant among cats. Our cat tyrant revealed a human-like confusion and fear. It covered its eyes with its paws and whimpered. Why is it that everyone else transmigrated into a human, but I'm an orange cat? This cat is too fat, it's panting after 2 steps. The cat tyrant angrily patted the soil under its paws and kept meowing. Mr. Cat was the lucky person who participated in the dream of 1,000 years activity. In his eyes, there was a virtual screen in front of him. Not only did countless salted fish not sympathize with him, but they also laughed at him. Up until now, there were already more than 10 lucky people. Although the previous few didn't meet Jiang Pingji, they were still humans. Only this one turned into a cat, and his landing place changed from Dongqing to Zhongzhou. Yes, the cat first became Nie Yang's pet cat. Fang Heting, what else can you do besides laughing? Didn't you notice that the little brother's reaction was scary? There was no one else besides the cat. Who was he talking to? The way he talked to himself gave people goosebumps. By Shuega, what I care about the most is that sentence, don't we still have you? Even Nie Liang fell for it, let alone Nie Qing. Nie Liang was the strongest duke in the Nie family of Zhongzhou. What did he fall for? They didn't know Nie Qing's identity, but they felt something was off. The salted fish didn't notice any more clues, but Jiang Pingji saw it clearly. The young man named Nie Yang had a broken piece of the system on him. He could easily tell who he was talking to. Chapter 1450. It's not scary to be a cat, it's scary to be an orange cat. The huge and fat orange cat squatted on the wall, looking at the scenery outside the courtyard. It was sad and bright, meowing from time to time. If anyone understood cat language, they would know that the cat was muttering. Is there any place to give a bad review for the dream of a millennium event? I can't stand this injustice. It's rare for me to be lucky, but I actually became a cat after transmigrating. It's fine if I become a cat, but why can't I become the panda raised by Beauty Ci? Even if I can't be the panda that shares Beauty Ci's bed, I can't be an orange cat. Look at this weight, look at this body, I'm panting after every 3 steps. The audience laughed and laughed at him. Qingxi Changqing Si Xiao, brother, you're brave. You actually want to become the panda raised by Beauty Ci. The streamer's streaming room is connected to this sub-streaming room. She knows what you're wearing. Do you want to have intimate contact with the god-slaying saber? Jiang Pingji is famous for being narrow-minded. Who has the guts to touch her man? Hujia Zibo, a panda isn't a cat, it's a bear. Meow meow meow, brother orange cat, don't move your butt. Can't you see that the tiles on the wall are about to be broken by you? Salted fish have no sympathy. The orange cat looked at the bullet screen and sighed faintly. At that moment, the ears on his head twitched. He acutely heard footsteps approaching. He turned his head and saw a tall and handsome young man standing under the courtyard wall. His appearance was still a little immature, somewhere between a youth and a teenager. Good looks and good temperament. The fat orange cat shook his whiskers. His wounded heart was healed. Although he couldn't hug Beauty Ci, the young man in front of him was also very good. He had a bit of the demeanor of Wei Ci when he was young. Isn't this a Yang's cat? Why did you come here? Nie Qing reached out to Fatty Orange. The other party was unmoved, his posture as steady as a mountain. He smiled and asked the servant to bring something to stand on his feet. Then he carried the cat down. As soon as he was in Nie Qing's arms, Fatty Orange let out a long meow, wishing he could roll in the young man's arms. Brothers, the arms of this high-quality beautiful young man are full of the smell of sunshine. It smells so good. In the livestream room, Salted Fish was even more jealous. Wasn't this cat's luck too good? Qiu Yi Xiaohua, what does sunlight taste like? My corpse? Fatty Orange relied on the fact that he was a cat. Nie Qing and the others couldn't understand what he was saying, so he meowed at the audience in the live broadcast room. When Nye Qing saw Fatty Orange's unusual behavior, he hurriedly returned the kitten to Nye Yang. As the two conversed, Fatty Orange and Salted Fish realized that this cheerful youth was Nye Qing. Seeing Nye Yang and Nye Qing getting along so well with each other, the crowd couldn't help but feel a chill in their hearts. They weren't deaf. Nye Yang's words, even Nye Yang fell for it, not to mention Nye Qing, were clearly filled with malice. Thus, when Nye Qing was about to return the kitten to Nye Yang, Fatty Orange clung onto Nye Qing's sleeve tightly, his cries of agony and sorrow. Nye Qing smiled bitterly. "You usually despise it. Why do you like it so much today?" Nye Yang also said, "Then I'll have to trouble elder brother to take care of him for a day or two. Perhaps he's throwing a tantrum." Nye Qing had no choice but to carry the orange cat away. He knew that his cousin liked the cat very much, so he took good care of it. The orange cat also took the opportunity to wander around Nye Qing's room. Seeing that Nye Qing had started working, he even climbed onto the desk and squatted down, looking like he was supervising Nye Qing. Nye Qing originally wanted to carry Fatty Orange away, but the kitten was so obedient that he softened his heart and didn't stop him. Little did he know that Fatty Orange's body contained a future soul. Through Fatty Orange's eyes, Jiang Pingji could clearly see the contents of the documents that Nye Qing was handling. Nye Yang had the heart to groom his son, but he didn't pass any important secrets to him, so these documents were of no use to Jiang Pingji. Fatty Orange was hesitant to write something to remind the youth in front of him. Nye Yang had malice towards him and Nye Yang, so he had to be on guard. But, just as Fatty Orange was about to go crazy, the system's notification made his whole body go cold, as if he'd been splashed with cold water. Now that he was a cat, the words he could write with his claws were already shocking enough. Would Nye Qing believe him if he wrote it? If Nye Qing went to confront Nye Yang and accidentally revealed something, this cat's life would be forfeit. Thinking of this, Fatty Orange couldn't help but shiver. He had only transmigrated for 4 hours. He couldn't be the first unlucky person to encounter a life-threatening crisis and have his transmigration interrupted, could he? The owner of this body, Fatty Orange, was also innocent. After being transmigrated, he was beaten to death by his owner. That was too cruel. Fatty Orange's thoughts of intervening were suppressed, and he didn't dare to let his imagination run wild. Forget it, he was just an outsider who experienced transmigration. How could he intervene in someone else's life? Fatty Orange wagged his tail and lay quietly on Nye Qing's lap, looking like he was saying, "I'll take over this territory." Nye Qing smiled faintly and shook his head, giving his consent to this audacious cat. They ate, slept, enjoyed the service of the shit-shoveling officer, and took a walk together. Nye Qing pinched Fatty Orange's chubby cheeks and said, "No wonder Yang likes you so much. I like you a little too." Fatty Orange couldn't control his body's habit. He stuck out his tongue and licked his fur, throwing a look of disdain at Nye Qing as he licked. "Young man, you have to be more careful. Stay away from Nye Yang to ensure your safety." Nye Qing didn't receive Fatty Orange's look. Instead, he strolled all the way to the family school. The man and the cat could clearly hear the sound of reading coming from within the courtyard walls. Fatty Orange squatted on his shoulder and revealed a thoughtful expression. Nye Qing stroked Fatty Orange's cat and sighed. "I really hope that one day, such peace and tranquility can spread throughout China. Father is going to lead the army into battle. If he can return victorious, we'll be closer to our goal." After a while, Nye Qing said again, "Unfortunately, Father thinks that I'm too young and ordered me to guard the rear. Otherwise, I really want to lead the army with Father and kill the enemy." Fatty Orange rolled his eyes. "Kill the enemy? With your soft skin and tender flesh? Father's health is getting worse. I'm very worried, but this matter can't be easily leaked. I can only talk to you, you little bastard." Nye Qing somewhat understood why Nye Yang liked cats. They were obedient and didn't speak the human language, so he didn't have to worry about being on guard when talking to them. After a few hours, Fatty Orange's energy was exhausted and he fell into a deep sleep. When he woke up again, he was extremely resistant to Nye Qing. He howled and wanted to find his master, Nye Yang. Nye Qing didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Jiang Pingji looked at the screen and pondered. Niaoliang, can't we really have fun? His fingers twirled the clean brush, his deep eyes filled with malice. If that's the case, we can change our strategy. Jiang Pingji originally planned to attack Yang Tao fiercely and adopt a defensive policy at the Zhongzhou front. Chapter 1451. Even though everyone already knew of their lord's temperament, changing the battle plan before the battle still made them sprain their backs. My lord, changing your mind before the battle is not a good sign. As the commander-in-chief, she cannot be so capricious. Qiguan Rang raised his eyebrows slightly and glanced at Wei Zixiao out of the corner of his eye. He happened to catch Wei Si's unmoving gaze. After pondering for a while, Qiguan Rang restrained his helpless expression and regained his composure. He stepped forward and asked, "Why did you do this, my lord?" According to the initial battle plan, they focused their forces on Yang Tao and prepared to take down Zhangzhou in the shortest time possible before attacking Nanqing. The Nie family of Zhongzhou had a fierce military force, but the army was backed by Zhanjiang Pass. They used the natural stronghold there to defend the pass, so it would be difficult for the Nie family to attack. Zhanjiang Pass was the gateway between Dongqing and Zhongzhou. The terrain there was very steep, making it easy to defend and difficult to attack. When Meng Zhan stirred up trouble and tried to sell Cangzhou to the Nie family of Zhongzhou, the Nie family eagerly sent people over for Zhanjiang Pass. No matter who took down Zhanjiang Pass, it was very profitable. If the Nie family got it, they would have the initiative in attacking. If Jiang Pingji had it, it would be much easier for her to defend. Because of the two battles, the troops under Jiang Pingji's tent had been divided into two. They had been marching for 2 days. One was to attack Yang Tao of Nanqing, the other was to attack Zhanjiang Pass of Cangzhou to stop the Nie family from breaking through. The former was to attack while the latter was to defend. Naturally, the assigned troops and personnel were different. His lord slapped her forehead and said that she wanted to change the battle plan. It would have a huge impact in the future. If they were not careful, they would delay the battle and cause endless trouble. Due to the trust between the ruler and her subjects, Qiguan Rang wanted to hear his lord's reason for doing so. If the reason could convince him, he would support it. If his lord's reason could not convince Qiguan Rang would definitely not let her mess around. He thought that Wei Si and his lord had discussed this, but when he glanced at him just now, Wei Si's expression was also very surprised. Thinking of this, Qiguan Rang fanned the feather fan in his hand more frequently. The frequency was more than doubled, causing his outer robe to flutter. Jiang Pingji looked at Wei Si. Wei Si stepped forward and bowed. My lord, it doesn't matter if you change the plan, but the difficulty lies in the fact that you have to adjust the troops on 2 routes and drag the logistics and rations. It is a taboo for a commander to change at the last minute. In Si's opinion, I would like to ask my lord to reconsider before making a decision. Since Wei Si and Qiguan Rang had expressed their vague objections, the others were naturally harder to convince. However, Jiang Pingji had accumulated her power for a long time, so they didn't threaten her. Let's hear what the Lord has to say first before deciding whether to support or oppose it. On the other hand, Sun Wen frowned as he realized that things weren't as simple as they seemed. Sun Wen had the least contact with Jiang Pingji, but that didn't stop him from treating his lord as a research topic. He often pondered over her. According to his understanding, his lord was a typical person who would not get up early without benefits. It was impossible for her not to know the potential dangers of changing her mind. Jiang Pingji glanced around and her gaze fell on Sun Zidao, who was seated at the back. What does Zidao know about the Nie family of Zhongzhou? Of all the people present, only Sun Wen was from Zhongzhou. If one were to talk about understanding, the great scholar Wan Changzhai understood him the best. However, he was an educator. Jiang Pingji still counted on him to help her manage the Jinlin branch. How could she bear to drag him to the front line to suffer? Nie Sun could also help, but he was disheartened and didn't meddle in these matters anymore. Jiang Pingji didn't want to force her cousin to become an official, so she turned a blind eye to his affairs. After counting them, there was only Sun Wen left. Sun Wen said, The Nye family originated in the early years of the Northern Qin dynasty. It has a history of nearly 700 years. They lived in Bianzhou for a long time. They have a deep foundation. After many generations of family heads, they have disciples and former officials all over the world. The Nye family is related to many gentry families by marriage. The relationships between the forces are complicated. Zhongzhou is in chaos and the royal family is tyrannical. When the Nye family raised their arms and called for help, 3 prefectures responded. They now occupy more than half of Zhongzhou. Before the 16 kingdoms, the Central Plains had been unified for 367 years. It was called the Northern Qin dynasty. The Nye family had prospered since the early years of the Northern Qin dynasty. It had continued to this day without losing its legacy. It should be noted that the Feng family, which Feng Jin belonged to, was only 100 years earlier than the Nye family. Is there anything else besides this? She joked. The Nye family has hundreds of responses to a single call. The hearts of the people are aligned. Did I kick an iron plate? Sun Wen's expression was solemn as he denied it. What a joke. If his lord was afraid to fight, his dream of revenge would really remain a dream. My lord, you must be joking. Sun Wen said, if the Nye family is described as a 1,000-year-old tree with deep roots and luxuriant branches, its crown can cover the sky and the sun. Others are fearful of it, but that doesn't include my lord. Outsiders are afraid of the Nye family. Is it really because the Nye family is powerful and unrivaled? In my opinion, they are obviously frightened by the tiger's skin that the Nye family wears. My lord is a real dragon. Why would you be afraid of these things? Jiang Pingji said, the tiger's skin that the Nye family wears? How do you explain this? Sun Wen said, does my lord still remember the Su family from Jie County? Jiang Pingji nodded. Of course she remembered. Su Bei and Su Fei, the pair of brothers who suffered hardship. Now that she thought about it, she still sighed. Sun Wen said, the Su family from Jie County is a good example for the Nye family from Bianzhou. Jiang Pingji raised her eyebrows and smiled. Tell me in detail. Sun Wen said, now, the most senior in the Nye family and the most influential person is the grandfather of Nye Liang, the marquis of the Nye family. Before Nye Liang took power, the entire Nye family was under his control. Those who are old and don't die are thieves. He is no exception. He held on to his authority and refused to let go. In order to stabilize his position in the family, he deliberately suppressed his children and made them tired of fighting among themselves. He has many grandchildren, but the only outstanding one is Nye Liang. Although there was not much information, Sun Wen could guess how Nye Liang had risen to power. It was a pity that Nye Liang was not ruthless enough. He did not cut through the Gordian knot and get rid of the obstacles in his way. Now he was troubled. Jiang Pingji asked again, in that case, the tiger's skin that you mentioned is, Sun Wen said, the Nye family has an empty shell, but inside, there is disunity and disunity. They are like a plate of loose sand. There is nothing to be afraid of when the children fight. If it was the Nye family that was united, it would not be easy to fight. If they were unlucky, it might even become a protracted war. Of course, these problems had not spread to the bone. If the head of the Nye family had the decisiveness to cut off his tail and seek survival, he might be able to turn the situation around. Sun Wen asked her, is it because of this that my lord feels that the Nye family is easier to deal with than Yang Tao? Chapter 1452. Nye Liang? Qiguan Rang and the others looked at each other. They did not receive any news. Wei Ci stepped forward and said, when you mentioned this, I thought of something. A few years ago, the Nye family sent Nye Liang as an envoy to Dongqing in an attempt to force you to hand over Cangzhou. In the end, the Nye family returned without success. Nye Liang and his men left in a hurry. Qiguan Rang interrupted, Nye Liang's health has been poor since then. Wei Ci smiled bitterly and asked Jiang Pingji to punish him. He continued, my elder brother is Nye Liang's right-hand man. My elder brother secretly asked me to feel Nye Liang's pulse. I was shocked to find that Nye Liang's diet and medicine were poisoned. His lifespan was greatly reduced. Even if he recuperates carefully afterward, I'm afraid he won't live long. I heard that Nie Liang fought for power with my grandfather. He has to look over everything personally. He probably doesn't have time to recuperate. This indirectly proved Jiang Pingji's intelligence. Of course, Jiang Pingji did not blame Wei Ci. He had confessed to her about this in the past. Qiguan Rang frowned. The secret agents sent by our army did not find any news of Nie Liang being sick or weak. Not only was there no news, but the secret agents also found out that Nie Liang ate 2 big bowls of food every time. He often rode horses and hunted. His complexion was excellent. Did he look like he did not have long to live? Jiang Pingji said, "What do you mean, Wenjing?" Qiguan Rang looked at Jiang Pingji helplessly. His lord had made up her mind to change the plan. Changing one's mind at the last minute will have a great impact. If it is not handled well, it will shake the army's morale. Please reconsider, my lord. Jiang Pingji had naturally considered this point. They could not come to a stalemate and could only temporarily disperse the meeting. Wei Ci and Qiguan Rang left one after another. Qiguan Rang asked Wei Ci, "How confident are you in this matter?" Wei Ci said, "Nie Liang's health is indeed not very good. He doesn't have time to recuperate carefully. I'm afraid he has been using tiger wolf medicine all these years. If I'm optimistic, it's estimated that he only has 1 year left. If I'm pessimistic, he can still struggle on for another 2 to 3 years. He won't live long." In the previous life, Nie Liang also knelt at about this time, kneeling disgracefully. Everyone knew that Nie Liang was in poor health, but only a few people knew that there was something fishy about his death, and Wei Ci happened to be one of them. In his previous life, Nie Liang did not trust anyone except his eldest brother, Wei Xiao. Wei Chang secretly invited Wei Ci to the residence to take Nie Liang's pulse. From the pulse, it was clear that Nie Liang's poison had entered his bone marrow. However, the physician hired by the Nie family insisted that it was a congenital weakness and a cold. The medicine that was prescribed was naturally not right, and the longer it was delayed, the more serious it became. Wei Ci helped Nie Liang recuperate for a while and expelled most of the poison, but he still could not save Nie Liang's life. Who asked Nie Liang to be too capable? The Nie clan's 5th branch was practically in an invincible position. How could the other uncles endure it? In his previous life, Nie Liang did not lay a hand on his clansmen until his death. Perhaps it could be said that by the time he realized he had been poisoned by his clansmen, it was already too late. On his deathbed, Nie Liang entrusted his child to his good friend Yu. Wei Yong did not disappoint his good friend. Not only did he marry his daughter to him, but he also taught and nurtured him as his own son. Thinking of this, the face of a young man with a light smile appeared in Wei Ci's mind. He had interacted with Nie Liang's eldest son, Nie Qing, a few times, and had a good impression of this youth. Nie Qing did not enjoy the benefits brought about by the Nie clan's reputation. Instead, he was dragged down by the Nie clan and was implicated time and time again. It was truly regrettable. In the 18th year of the reign of Yongchen, the emperor was bedridden for several months. The aristocrats were eager to take action, and Crown Prince Zhang's will force the emperor to abdicate under their support. It was more like a farce than a forced abdication. The main character of the farce, Crown Prince Zhangzhua, was also kept in the dark and became a puppet in the hands of others. The aristocrats at the side were secretly adding fuel to the fire. Other than the large clans like the Nie clan and the Wei clan, the other aristocrats were also involved, stirring up a turbulent situation in the imperial court. According to Wei Ci's understanding of young Emperor Jiang Yan, none of these meddlesome people would have a good ending. That was the truth. Not long after the coffin of the deceased emperor was buried in the mausoleum, the young emperor swept through the imperial court swiftly and decisively. None of the aristocrats who were involved fared well, and all of them suffered great losses. This was Wei Ci's previous life. The changes in this life were too great. Everything was different. Nie Liang, who was originally only playing the supporting role, became the leader and became the head of the Nie clan. However, there were many things that did not change. Nie Liang was still fated to die early. In his previous life, Sun Wen had prolonged the life of the Nye clan, but now, Wei Ci counted the time on his fingers and could not help but feel relieved. After the internal strife in the Nye clan, the third branch became the final winner. In the end, a young man named Nye Yang came out on top. Nye Yang was scheming, but unfortunately he lacked some luck. At that time, the Nye clan was already beyond saving. Qiguan Rang said, "The difference between 1 year and 2 or 3 years is huge. My lord seems to have made up her mind. My lord's temperament is like this. When she's stubborn, even 10 oxen can't pull her back." Qiguan Rang fanned himself and asked, "Do you have a way to make the best of both worlds?" The strength of the troops on both sides is not much different. It's not appropriate to change the leader at the last minute. It's better to make the best of a mistake and replenish the logistics. For the other feudal lords, they had to mobilize their elites to attack the main area. The troops in the defensive area were relatively weak. Because of the terrain at the pass, the requirements for the quality of the elite troops could be lowered appropriately. Jiang Pingji's camp was different. Her troops were trained over and over again. Except for a small number of newly recruited troops, the rest were considered elites. Their overall quality was very high. There was not much difference in which troops attacked or defended. Therefore, Wei Ci suggested increasing the investment and building more equipment to make up for the hidden danger of changing her mind at the last minute. Qiguan Rang said in distress, "In this way, there will be a shortage of rations. It will be hard to survive the winter." Transport and manufacturing equipment also required cooks. Cooks also needed to eat. Naturally, the expenditure on rations would increase. That was an astronomical figure that greatly exceeded the budget. If there was a shortage of rations during the war, it would be a dead end. Wei Ci said, "This is already the only solution. Why don't Wenjing persuade my lord to change her mind?" Qiguan Rang snorted coldly. Wei Ci and his lord had slept together before. If he could not make his lord waver, Qiguan Rang would most likely return in failure. At that moment, Sun Wen quietly went to see Jiang Pingji and expressed his intentions. "You want to go to the Nye camp?" The two families were obviously going to fall out, but Sun Wen still had the guts to go. Sun Wen said, "My lord, are you sure that Nye Liang doesn't have long to live?" Jiang Pingji did not give him a definite answer. She said, "I'm 60% sure." Sun Wen said, 60% is enough. Whether Nye Liang is really sick or not, we'll know when we see him for ourselves. The two armies are about to go to war. What if they detain you? The two armies did not want to go to war, but it did not prevent them from acting like hooligans and secretly detaining people. Sun Wen said with a smile, "I'm already a bag of old bones. There's nothing to cherish." Jiang Pengji said with a displeased expression, "How precious is life? If I don't cherish myself, who will cherish Sun Lan?" Sun Lan had not grown up yet. Was Sun Wen really willing to let her go? When Sun Wen heard that, he could only smile bitterly and change his words. In the end, he still managed to persuade Jiang Pingji to agree to go to the Nye camp. Chapter 1453. Jiang Pingji's troops were divided into two groups. One group followed her to Zhanjiang Pass in Sangzhou, while the other group was led by Fu Wang to Hu County to prepare for the war. Fu Wang's army had yet to arrive at the front line when an urgent secret letter was sent, making him think that something big had happened. Fu Wang crushed the bamboo tube and took out the neatly folded letter. He opened the letter and squinted his eyes to read it carefully. After reading 10 lines at a glance, his sword-like eyebrows furrowed so tightly that they could kill a fly. "Someone quickly invite the general's advisor here. Say that there's something important to discuss." He was a little annoyed. Didn't he lead the troops to attack Yang Tao? Why did she change the order and let him focus on defense and attack when the opportunity arose? The experience of attacking and defending were completely different. Fu Wang had always attacked as a form of defense and rarely defended passively. At present, the military camp's allocation of supplies was mainly for attack. Their defensive capabilities were relatively weak. Jiang Pingji's order put him in a difficult position. Although the logistical supplies were already on the way, it would take some time to transport them to the front line. If something happened during this time, such as the enemy suddenly launching a sneak attack, it would be a pain in the ass. He summoned everyone to the main tent overnight to discuss how to stabilize the situation and clean up the mess caused by his lord's last-minute change of orders. By the time they reached a conclusion, the sky outside the tent had completely darkened, like a pool of ink that couldn't be stirred up. It was midsummer and the temperature was hot and humid. There were so many mosquitoes and flies around the tent that they couldn't sleep. Feng Zhen went back to get a basin of water to wipe his sweat, but he still couldn't sleep. He simply came out for some fresh air. Not long after walking, he met a familiar face. Feng Zhen wiped his sweat with a handkerchief in his left hand and fanned himself with a cattail leaf fan in his right. He said to Yang Si, "Jing Rong, you can't sleep in the middle of the night?" Yang Si wore thin pajamas and a light muslin cloak. His slightly damp long hair draped over his shoulders. He was probably too angry to sleep. Glancing at Feng Zhen from the corner of his eye, Yang Si said calmly, "Aren't you the same?" The news of the change in military orders came too suddenly. Not many people could sleep peacefully. "I've been weak and afraid of heat since I was young. Summer is especially hard to bear," Feng Zhen said. "I've enjoyed too much in the north these years. I'm not used to this weather." Feng Zhen was from Zhangzhou's Anshan County. Logically speaking, he should have been used to it, but he was even more afraid of heat than Yang Si. Both of them couldn't sleep, and since they had nothing to do in the middle of the night, they decided to play chess and play a few rounds. Yang Si could tell Feng Zhen's state of mind with one look at his playing style. He was impatient and full of worries, unlike prodigal Feng. Feng Zhen had lost 3 rounds in a row. He waved his hand disinterestedly and said, "No more, no more. I'm not in the right condition today." Yang Si thought of something and asked, "Zisher, are you worried about your son's safety?" According to the original plan, Fu Wang's army would be the main attacking force, while Jiang Pingji's army would mainly defend. Occupying the natural stronghold of Zhanjiang Pass, the troops under the tent were all elites. The difficulty of defending against invading enemies was relatively low, and the danger was also greatly reduced. Now that the order had been changed, Zhanjiang Pass had switched from defense to offense, and the danger level had skyrocketed. Feng had been assigned to the Lord's team and could face life-threatening danger at any time. This child has always been smart and sensible. It's the first time he's been so far away from home, and he doesn't have any relatives to take care of him. Feng Zhen usually behaved in a carefree manner, and his attitude towards his son was completely lax, but he was very concerned about him. Yang Si couldn't help but laugh. Outsiders say that prodigal Feng only cares about his own happiness and doesn't care about his son. Now that I see it, it doesn't seem so. Feng Zhen snorted and sighed. Most fathers feel the same way. He didn't say it, but he was concerned about him in his heart. Yang Si listened to Feng Zhen's sentiments and couldn't help but think of his child who was still in swaddling clothes. His and Jiang Shaowei's child was born last year. It was a baby girl. She was small and soft, and her limbs were so soft that they seemed to have no bones. When Yang Si hugged her for the first time, his hands were trembling. When the child meekly snuggled into his arms, an inexplicable emotion welled up in his heart, as if it wanted to fill up a certain empty wasteland. For the first time, he realized that he had become the father of another life. Yang Si could understand Feng Zhen's concern and concern for the child. The conditions of the march were harsh, and the summer nights were especially unbearable. Feng Yi tossed and turned in bed, unable to sleep, so he simply picked up his sword and practiced outside. He only stopped when his arms were swollen and he was covered in sweat. Perhaps he was too tired, but he fell asleep as soon as he returned to his tent. He actually had a good night's sleep. There was still half a day's journey before they reached Zhanjiang Pass. Jiang Pingji led the troops and marched at a normal speed, while Sun Wen galloped toward Zhanjiang Pass under the escort of a group of troops and horses. The two armies hadn't started fighting, but there was an atmosphere of a storm brewing. It was solemn and dignified. The Nye family's army had already arrived at the front lines in batches and set up camp. Standing at the gates of Zhanjiang Pass and looking out, there was an endless stream of crimson flags at the end of the horizon, like a burning cloud. Not only did the flag have the word Nye on it, but it also had the Nye family's emblem. Within the borders of Zhongzhou, the common people recognized the word and the meaning of the emblem. The people near Zhanjiang Pass had long since fled after hearing the news. Their families had migrated to other places. If they stayed near the battlefield, who knew if they would be beheaded by the ruffian soldiers to claim their military exploits? It wasn't like such things had never happened in the past. In troubled times, human lives were as worthless as grass. It was a luxury to even cry out for grievances when one died. Sun Wen had already handed over the document that Jiang Pingji had personally written. This was diplomatic between the two armies. It was reasonable for Nye Liang to personally summon him. Nye Liang was sitting in the tent. Below him sat a group of trusted subordinates. These people were quite famous within the borders of Zhongzhou. In comparison, Nye Liang's close friend and trusted subordinate, Lao Ai, did not have much of a presence. Nye Liang looked at the contents of the document and said, "The words are good, but the attitude is perfunctory." The contents of the document were personally written by Jiang Pingji, but the content was written by someone else. Why did Lu Shi send an envoy at this time? He's most likely here to test the waters. Lu Shi's troops are divided into two groups. The pressure is not small. Nanxing and Yang Tao are nothing to be afraid of, but they know very little about our army. I'm afraid they don't have much confidence in rashly starting a war, someone answered. Right, who is this envoy? Sun Wen? I don't think I've heard of him. The person who spoke was a young man in his early 20s. He felt that the name Sun Wen was somewhat familiar, but he couldn't remember who he was. Not only him, but the others in the tent also didn't immediately remember. It couldn't be helped. Apart from being in the limelight during the battle of the northern borderline, Sun Wen had been governing the rear. His presence was frighteningly low. Sun Wen? Wait, could it be Sun Zidao who works under Lu Shi's camp? Someone remembered. Why is this person here? It was rare in the world to be able to develop a spy's career to such an extent, to have one foot in several boats and still do it with ease. Playing the northern borderline in the palm of his hand wasn't the most flashy thing. The most flashy thing was that after doing so many things, Sun Wen could still escape unscathed. Ever since the battle of the northern borderline, Sun Wen had quietened down. The outside world guessed that Jiang Pingji was afraid of Sun Wen, so she was demoted and hid him. They didn't expect Jiang Pingji to put Sun Wen in an important position at this time. Nye Liang lowered his eyes and said, "It's not a big deal to test the waters. The important thing is, what is he testing? Testing the strength of the Nye camp." Chapter 1454. The two armies were about to go to war, but Sun Wen came with Jiang Pingji's letter. No one could figure out his true intentions. Before Nye Liang summoned Sun Wen, he had Fan Chen entertain Sun Wen and secretly sound him out to find out Sun Wen's true intentions. Fan Chen? Sun Wen's heart skipped a beat when he heard the surname. He said, "I see that you are graceful and charming. You must be from an ordinary family. May I make a bold guess that you are from the Fan family of Liang?" Zhongzhou had 10 prefectures and 33 counties. The land was vast and rich. Liang was a county under the jurisdiction of Sun Prefecture. It was a fertile land of fish and rice. Because of the prevalence of private schools, Zhongzhou produced many distinguished people who left their names in history. Although the Fan family could not be compared to the Nye family, it was still one of the top gentry families in Zhongzhou. Sun Wen knew Fan Chen's surname when he heard it. He had left Zhongzhou earlier. Fan Chen's name had not spread out of Sun Prefecture, so Sun Wen had never heard of him. Fan Chen's eyes were filled with surprise. He smiled and said, "You have sharp eyes. I am indeed from the Fan family of Liang." The teacher spoke with a Bianzhou accent. "I didn't believe it when I heard that you were from Zhongzhou, but now I do." Sun Wen smiled. "Instead of saying that my eyes are sharp, I should say that you have sharp ears. You guessed it right away." He had lived in Bei Prefecture, northern borderline, for many years. His accent had changed due to the local influence. He did not expect Fan Chen to be able to recognize it. Fan Chen was very hospitable. He specially sent a chef to make local delicacies in Bianzhou. Even Sun Wen's temporary tent was decorated according to the local style. If not for the tense relationship between the two armies, Sun Wen would have given Fan Chen a 5-star rating. He was meticulous in his work. In a familiar environment, people could not help but let their guard down, especially when they were facing people who had a good impression of them. Fan Chen and Sun Wen chatted about the past in Zhongzhou. They were very congenial. No matter what Sun Wen said, Fan Chen could reply. Not long after, their relationship had taken a big step closer. To outsiders, Sun Wen and Fan Chen seemed like a pair of like-minded friends. They talked to each other happily. Only the people involved knew that they were using words as a weapon. They had exchanged dozens of exchanges and were constantly on guard against language traps set by the other party. If he wasn't careful, he might be tricked by the other party. The two of them were chatting happily when a soldier's voice came from outside the tent. Nie Liang summoned Sun Wen. Sun Wen and Fan Chen modestly thanked each other and left the tent side by side. The flags outside fluttered in the wind, and the flags with the word "Thi" on them looked like burning clouds full of vigor. 3 ears represented Nie, and the Nie on the flag was written in seal script. It looked simple and unadorned. In Zhongzhou, this surname was even higher than that of the royal family. Even the illiterate commoners knew what this pattern meant. As someone from Bian province, Sun Wen naturally knew of the Nie clan. Sun Wen looked at the flag, his eyes like a bottomless abyss. He smiled and said to Fan Chen, who was next to him, "Speaking of which, this old man and the Nie clan have an indissoluble bond." Fan Chen nodded and pretended to be listening attentively. Sun Wen said, "When I was young, my talent was poor. I was always a step behind others in everything I learned. After I reached my 20s, I accomplished nothing. Only when he was middle-aged did he manage to become a lowly official. That year, I thought I had some ability and recommended myself to the Nie clan as a foreign official." Of course, Fan Chen didn't know this history, but he wasn't surprised. Since Sun Wen was from Bian province and came from a poor family, his only way out was to learn from the Nie clan and rely on them. What he felt was a pity was that Sun Wen wasn't recruited by the Nie clan. Instead, he went all the way to Dongqing and became an advisor to the enemy. Fan Chen let out a sigh of pity and subtly changed the topic. Without a doubt, Sun Wen was a talent. If he wasn't a talent, he wouldn't have been able to play the northern borderline around. This was an indisputable fact. Such a talent had recommended himself to the Nie clan as a foreign official, but the Nie clan didn't recruit him. It was a loss. Fan Chen couldn't say that Sun Wen wasn't talented enough, but he also couldn't say that the Nie clan had eyes but couldn't see and mistook pearls for fish eyes. He could only express his pity from the Nie clan's point of view. At the same time, he affirmed Sun Wen's talent to save face for both parties. Fan Chen was very good with words, and his words were very soothing. Sun Wen curled his lips. His calm eyes carried a hint of coldness. His smile didn't reach his eyes, and it gave people the illusion that he was smiling hypocritically. In reality, Sun Wen was recruited after he recommended himself to the Nie clan. However, he was old and didn't have any outstanding achievements in the first half of his life, so no one thought highly of him. After Sun Wen joined the Nie clan, he was still a lowly official with no sense of existence. He had no hope of making a name for himself. A year later, Sun Wen was discouraged. Even if he didn't go to the roll call for half a month, no one would mention him. Not long after, his only son, Sun Lai, offended a direct descendant of the Nie clan at a gathering. That person was very arrogant, ruthless, and domineering. Just because Sun Lai won first place and made him lose face, he actually sent people to break Sun Lai's legs. Not only that, he even used his connections to send Sun Lai to the border on a groundless charge. Sun Wen's family wasn't well off, but Sun Lai was also his pampered son. How could he endure such hardships? He caught a cold on the way and died early. His wife and daughter-in-law couldn't take the blow and died one after another. Of the 5 people in the family, 3 were suddenly lost. Only Sun Wen and his young grandson were left to depend on each other. Sun Wen was worried that the Nie clan would continue to persecute them and had no choice but to leave Zhongzhou with his grandson, Lan Lan. They begged along the way and wandered from place to place. Who would have thought that Sun Wen, who was like a stray dog a few years ago, was now treated well by the Nie clan as an emissary? His gaze fell on the marshal's flag outside the marshal's tent. His slightly dry eyes were filled with a bit of coldness. "Emissary, please." Sun Wen was deep in thought when he heard Fan Chen's words. He came back to his senses and nodded with a smile as he entered the tent. Nie Liang sat in the main seat. Even though the light in the tent wasn't very bright, Sun Wen could see that he was a man of great bearing. This person was dignified, but in Sun Wen's view, Nie Liang was more like a scholar who recited poems and talked cheerfully with others. He wasn't a butcher or overlord who fought for supremacy and ate raw meat. After a quick glance, Sun Wen withdrew his gaze and bowed, revealing his identity in a neither servile nor overbearing manner. The two of them were separated by a distance of 6 zhang. The atmosphere wasn't right, so Sun Wen couldn't carelessly approach and take a look at Nie Liang's appearance. "This lowly one is Sun Wen. I've come on the orders of my master to inquire about a matter." There were many people in the tent, but it wasn't crowded or noisy. Nie Liang's voice wasn't loud, so Sun Wen could hear him clearly. "What is it?" Nie Liang asked. Chapter 1455. After he finished speaking, Sun Wen looked up at Nie Liang as if waiting for an answer. There were more than 30 people sitting in the tent. There were scholars in formal attire and majestic generals, but it was so quiet that a pin drop could be heard clearly. Many people looked at Sun Wen from the corner of their eyes. Some were disdainful, some were contemptuous, and some even stood up to refute Sun Wen. This person was none other than Fan Chen, who was talking cheerfully with Sun Wen just now. "Zidao, how can you confuse right and wrong? According to what I know, it was clearly the Duke of Lanting who wanted to invade Zhangzhou. The magistrate of Zhangzhou, Yang Tao, had no choice but to send an envoy to seek an alliance with my lord in order to protect the people and soldiers under his rule. Why did it become my lord's fault in Zidao's words?" Without waiting for Nie Liang to speak, Fan Chen said disapprovingly, "My lord is benevolent and magnanimous. He agreed to send troops to help after hearing the sincerity of the envoy. If the Duke of Lanting knew about it, he would take the initiative to withdraw his troops and quell the war. Does Zidao think this makes sense?" Sun Wen smiled and said, "According to what you said, Lord Guangshan intends to be the peacemaker? If so, Lord Guangshan can write a letter to inform my lord. Based on Lord Guangshan's character, how can my lord not give him face? If the three families can communicate peacefully, how can this happen? Lord Guangshan didn't inform my lord and brought more than 200,000 troops to camp outside Zhanjiang Pass to prepare for war. How can my lord turn a blind eye? If Nie Liang really sent troops for Yang Tao's sake, why didn't he write a letter to persuade him first?" Without a second word, Nie Liang brought more than 200,000 troops to threaten Zhanjiang Pass. What did he mean? Was Nie Liang trying to be the peacemaker or coveting Dongqing's territory? In the words of the livestream audience, it was like being a traitor and still wanting to build a memorial. It was obviously a robber's act, but he insisted on justifying it. How pretentious! In contrast, his lord's style was much more unusual. She was not picky about excuses at all. "Because you will attack me in the future, I will send troops to destroy you now. I will do it with a reason." Even a blind person could see how lame Jiang Pingji's reason was, but did she despise it? Fan Chen's expression changed. Before he could refute, his colleague stepped forward and asked Sun Wen, "I heard that the Duke of Lanting is under the control of the Huang Song and the Su and Pei families. The magistrate of Zhangzhou, Yang Tao, once led troops from Nanxing to Zhangzhou in Dongqing to help the Duke of Lanting resist the enemy." Sun Wen said, "Official business is official business. The two families have formed an alliance to resist the enemy. Although my lord has received help from the Duke of Xianxia, the Duke of Xianxia has sent troops to avenge his father's death. Don't all of you know that the Duke of Xianxia's enemy who killed his father, Zhao Xiao, has been recruited by Su Bei and is now a guest of honor under his banner? Forming an alliance was one thing, but Yang Tao was no saint. He didn't come all this way for righteousness, but for revenge. Don't make Yang Tao look like a white lotus. Sun Wen didn't buy it. Even so, the Duke of Lanting and Yang Tao are allies. Sun Wen said, "Indeed." The man laughed again. None of the allies that the Duke of Lanting has formed an alliance with have had a good ending. Jiang Pingji and Su Bei had formed an alliance. In the end, she had attacked the Barbican, and Su Bei had burned himself to death. Jiang Pingji and Huang Song had formed an alliance. The two of them had fought fiercely. Huang Song's troops had been defeated in Xianxia. Although he hadn't died, he had lost all interest in living. Jiang Pingji and Yang Tao had formed an alliance. They were preparing to fight, but the outcome was still unknown. She had also formed an alliance with Enchui. Once Yang Tao had knelt down, Enchui would be next. He would probably not have a good ending either. Look, this was all evidence of her killing her acquaintances. She treated her allies so cruelly and viciously. Did she still have any morals? Why did the scholars of the world not like to rely on Jiang Pingji? It was because her reputation was too bad. Others despised her. Sun Wen was calm and at ease in the face of such sarcasm. The world is bustling for benefits. The world is bustling for benefits. Forming an alliance to resist the enemy is a win-win situation. Both parties advance and retreat together. This is a temporary and expedient measure. I dare to ask on behalf of everyone, has my lord done anything unrighteous to harm her allies in the slightest during the alliance? Sun Wen smiled and said, "My lord has never done anything that hasn't dried up or broken an alliance. Your questioning just now is extremely rude." The alliance had ended. The two parties had different ideologies and standpoints. If it was time to fight, then fight. Was she still going to hold on to her old feelings and not let go? Even if she were to deal with Yang Tao now, his lord was perfectly justified. As a human, one had to fight for their dignity. Yang Tao had spread so many nasty rumors that slandered his lord. It was rumored that Yang Tao had condoned them. Who could sit still? His lord was a woman. Her reputation was more important than a man's. She definitely had to seek justice from Yang Tao. Sun Wen, whose skin was as thick as the corner of a city wall, was infuriated by his words. Another person said, "The excuse that the Duke of Lanting used to send troops to suppress Yang Tao is truly laughable. How can it be justified?" Sun Wen said, "That's not true. As a woman, my lord's journey has not been easy. Who doesn't know that it's a taboo for her to talk about her gender? Yang Tao's behavior was despicable. He found a man who looked like my lord and made him appear naked in public. Ordinary people paid money to remove his sinful roots. His actions undoubtedly threw my lord's reputation to the ground and trampled on it. If a noble lord can swallow this malice, how can my lord establish herself in the future?" Sun Wen spoke in a righteous manner. Yang Tao deserved to be beaten. The Nie family still rushed to form an alliance with him to fight against Jiang Pingji. They were obviously helping an evildoer. Someone sneered and said, "Whether this was done by the magistrate of Zhangzhou or not remains to be discussed. I heard that there is also a pair of men in Wanzhou who look like the magistrate of Zhangzhou and the important minister beside him, Wang Lin. The two of them did shameless things in broad daylight. Isn't this an act of humiliation?" Sun Wen said resolutely, "My lord has investigated this matter clearly. It was done by the traitors of the Tao family. They intended to frame and instigate trouble. If that's the case, why isn't the incident in Zhangzhou a ploy by the Tao family to frame Yang Tao? The style of these two incidents was so consistent. It was obviously the Tao family who instigated trouble. Jiang Pingji wrongly accused a good person. Not only did she not repent, but she also used the righteous excuse to crusade against Yang Tao. Her intentions were sinister. Sun Wen vetoed the idea once again, speaking with conviction. High-quality imitations of Yang Tao and Wang Lin appeared in Wanzhou. My lord sent people to deal with them and found the culprit by following the clues. What about Yang Tao? They didn't do anything. They didn't even make an official statement. It was obvious that they had a guilty conscience. When Sun Wen said this, he habitually forgot that Yang Tao was still in a stalemate with the four factions of Nanman at the front line of Nanxing. All in all, Yang Tao was asking for a beating. The Nie family, who carried the banner of righteousness, was also ambitious and coveted the territory of Dongqing. These two families were jackals of the same tribe. They had clearly planned to bully his lord. It was 2 against 1 to bully the pitiful little girl. Chapter 1456. This Sun Wen is a bit too difficult to deal with. Fan Chen was infuriated. Recalling Sun Wen's words in the tent, he was still angry. Did this person not want to live? Did Sun Wen really think that the words, "envoys are not to be killed," could save his life? With the tension between the two armies, he still dared to provoke the bottom line of Nie Yang and his subordinates. He really did not want to live. Not to mention, Sun Wen's behavior in front of Nie Yang could be considered arrogant and rude. If Nie Yang really killed him in anger, Sun Wen would have died in vain. Sun Wen had the courage to confront the enemy and disregard his own life. His courage was commendable. A young general laughed. It's fine if he's difficult to deal with, but he just has to be so thick-skinned. This general sees that the other gentlemen don't look very well. Isn't this Sun Wen an old man who can't carry anything? Isn't he afraid that someone will stab him a few times and send him to hell? Wei Yong looked down. Sun Wen is probably well aware of this and has long been fearless. This was the first time he had seen someone criticize someone so rudely. Fan Chen said, "This one is curious. Did this Sun Wen come here just to interrogate Lu Shi?" Wei Yong frowned lightly. "I'm afraid it's not that simple." The others sighed as they discussed. Only Nie Yang, who was sitting in the main seat, was deep in thought. His brows showed traces of hardship. Even with Nie Yang's excellent self-restraint, he had been angered by Sun Wen today. He was frail to begin with, and in order not to affect the morale of the army, he forced himself to hold on. Every time he appeared in front of others, he would not stay for long in order to hide the truth. Today, his anger affected his heart and lungs. He could only berate Sun Wen and find an excuse to send him away. As long as Sun Wen was in the Nie camp, he could not easily reveal his illness. Send people to keep an eye on Sun Wen. If he makes any strange movements, get rid of him. Nie Yang's thin lips parted slightly. His brows were filled with coldness, causing people to shiver for no reason. Yes. Sun Wen walked around the Nie camp's commander's tent and came out. He turned back to look at the commander's flag, snorted inwardly, and left with a flick of his sleeves. The reason why he chose to go to the Nie camp at this critical juncture was because he did not place too much importance on his own life. Initially, he was also prepared to go on a one-way trip. But now, he no longer thought so. Not only did he want to complete the mission perfectly, he also wanted to leave the Nie camp alive. No matter how big of a commotion he caused, Sun Wen had a good night's sleep. He woke up at daybreak to practice his swordsmanship. His posture was relaxed, as if the Nie camp was his own home. The spies who were secretly observing him were all speechless. This old man's son was really bold. This is Nie Ying's camp, not his home. How could he sleep so soundly and still have the leisure to practice swordsmanship? As it turned out, not only did Sun Wen have the time to practice swordsmanship, but he also had the time to be picky about the food in the camp. He made full use of his age advantage and flaunted his seniority. Even though he wasn't being unreasonable, he was still difficult to deal with. Nie Ying's men thought that they had taken good care of Sun Wen, but who knew that the old man still had 2 points of dissatisfaction. He was dissatisfied here and there. Sun Wen was a picky eater and refused to eat 2 meals in a row. When Fan Chen heard the news, he came to ask about it. After all, Sun Wen was a guest. Lord Nie Yang did not intend to kill him yet, so everyone had to treat him well. Why didn't Sun Wen want to eat? Because he didn't like to eat the wheat rice in the camp. Zhongzhao also planted wheat on a large scale. The food culture here was similar to that of Dongqing in the past. Wheat could be ground into flour and made into pastries, but it took a long time to remove the bran from the wheat, which led to the high cost of fine wheat flour. The conditions in the camp were harsh. The soldiers' rations were simple wheat rice, which was easy to make and convenient to carry and store. This also led to the food being mixed with gravel and small stones. If one accidentally bit them, their teeth would be damaged, and the eating experience would be very bad. As an envoy, Sun Wen's treatment was naturally better than that of ordinary soldiers, but it wasn't that fine. Sun Wen objected to this. The old man's teeth weren't good to begin with. If he didn't eat fine food, how would he eat when he was completely old? Fan Chen, who heard the whole story, was speechless. Was this the reason why Sun Wen refused to eat? Helplessly, Fan Chen could only assign a chef to Sun Wen to make whatever he wanted to eat. Needless to say, the military camp's cooks didn't only know how to cook in large pots. The chef's skills weren't good, but the conditions in the camp were harsh, so Sun Wen was reluctantly satisfied. For food, Sun Wen sent people to ask about it several times. Sometimes he even asked the chef to come over. As he ate, Sun Wen asked the chef, "Is the military camp's cooks all at this level?" The chef looked embarrassed. He said, "I can only cook. I can't compare to the famous chefs in the tavern." Sun Wen laughed mockingly. "I'm an honored guest, but my food is so coarse. Isn't Lord Guangshan even more aggrieved?" The chef didn't know who Lord Guangshan was. He only understood after Sun Wen reminded him. After he understood, he smiled bitterly and was terrified. Naturally, the Lord's meals couldn't be handled by ordinary cooks. If a spy sneaked into the camp and poisoned the Lord's meals, wouldn't it be over? To ensure safety, Nie Liang's meals were prepared by professionals. The ingredients and stove were also independent. Not only Nie Liang, but Zhang Pingji, Yang Tao, and the other feudal vassals were the same. Sun Wen couldn't get information from Fan Chen. He had to be on guard at all times, but it was much easier to deal with a chef. He didn't ask sensitive questions, such as how many meals Nie Liang ate in a day and how much he ate in a meal. He only asked about Nie Liang's daily food intake in a curious tone. He saw that Nie Liang had good teeth, so he probably hadn't eaten wheat rice mixed with gravel before. He probably wasn't used to it. The chef had been warned before, so he didn't dare to answer randomly. Instead, he chose his words carefully. Sun Wen lost interest after listening for a while. This Nie Liang really isn't an ordinary cautious person. Why was Sun Wen so emotional? He asked the chef just now and got information from him. He knew that Nie Liang stored his rice separately. Sun Wen only needed to know the approximate size and weight of the bag of rice, as well as how long it took to finish the bag. He could calculate how much rice Nie Liang ate in each meal. He calculated in his heart and found that Nie Liang really ate 2 bowls of rice per meal, just as the information said. However, this didn't prove that Nie Liang was in good health. At most, it proved that Nie Liang was meticulous enough to consider such details. If Nie Liang was in good health, why was Nie Liang only willing to see him once after Sun Wen had been in the Nie camp for 3 or 4 days? The only time they met, Nie Liang's position was still dark. Sun Wen couldn't see clearly from 2 or 3 feet away. In addition, Sun Wen had insulted so many people and behaved rudely. Nie Liang was obviously angry but didn't rebuke him. Instead, he found an excuse to send Sun Wen away. From these signs, Nie Liang's reaction contradicted the conclusion that he ate 2 bowls of rice per meal. Chapter 1457. Sun Wenzheng was suspicious that Nie Liang, who had been secretive before, suddenly wanted to see him. Fan Chen tried his best to object. Sun Wen's intentions are unclear. It doesn't matter if my lord doesn't want to see him. Why do you have to trouble yourself? Wei Yong looked at Nie Liang's pale face and the dark circles under his eyes, and he had a bad premonition. Even so, rationality still overpowered the emotions that welled up in his heart. Wei Yong said to Fan Chen, "Avoiding him is not a solution. What if the Lord refuses to see Sun Wen and Sun Wen refuses to leave? The 2 armies are about to go to war, and the barracks are frequently mobilized. If he is careless and hears something, then there will be no end of trouble." Nie Liang also showed a weak smile. "Sun Wen still wants to see me. I might know what he wants to investigate." Fan Chen revealed a puzzled expression. "This official is slow-witted. Please enlighten me, my lord." Nie Liang said, She divided her forces into 2. This was planned by her. Last year he had rested for a year, and this year he had been preparing for war for half a year. Logically speaking, he had considered everything that needed to be considered. It was impossible for him to make a last-minute change, which was a taboo. Not long ago, I received a secret report that the wood and stones in Dongqing were purchased in large quantities. They were transported to the front line through Lu Shi's woodworking workshop. Most of them were sent to Zhangzhou. Fan Chen and Wei Dan looked at each other. Neither of them had read those secret reports. This was the first time they had heard of them. Wei Yong asked, "Is Lord sure that it's being sent to Zhangzhou?" Zhanjiang Pass was at the border of Zhangzhou. If those supplies were sent to Zhangzhou, wouldn't this mean that military resources would be tilted towards the front lines of Zhanjiang Pass? Fan Chen probed, "Is Lu Shi afraid of us? That's why they were in such a hurry to add more military supplies? Did she send Sun Wen to confuse us?" Fan Chen's explanation was logical, but after carefully studying Jiang Pingji's style of doing things, Nie Liang felt that something was wrong. Nie Liang said, "Our army has more than 200,000 soldiers, but Lu Shi also has 150,000 soldiers, and he also has the natural stronghold of Zhanjiang Pass to rely on. If they really fought, the odds of victory were 50-50. Lu Shi was fighting on two fronts. It was not suitable for him to use an offensive strategy as a defensive strategy. In order to conserve her forces, she had to defend on one side and attack on the other. Yang Tao was weaker, so he was easier to deal with. With Yang Tao as the breakthrough point, he gathered his troops and attacked. The army still had the strength to attack the Nanxing vassals. In the end, Lu Shi transported the military supplies to Zhangzhou. Isn't that strange? According to Nie Liang's analysis, they should reinforce the southern battlefront at this time and try to take down Yang Tao in the shortest amount of time possible while still having the strength to deal with Enchui. Jiang Pingji did not play by the rules. Instead, she sent more troops to Zhangzhou. Was she that afraid that Zhanjiang Pass wouldn't be able to hold on? Nie Liang sent someone to collect information about Jiang Pingji. After careful analysis, he felt that Jiang Pingji was not that kind of person. It seemed like he was taking an unconventional approach, like a gambler staking everything on a single throw, but in reality he had a well-thought-out plan and would not waste even a fraction of his strength if he could. Therefore, the act of reinforcing Zhangzhou seemed to have a deeper meaning. Fan Chen was silent for a long time after hearing this, and a terrifying guess appeared in his mind. Could it be that Lu Shi wants to switch from defense to offense? Can she afford it? At this moment, Nie Liang felt a tightness in his chest. He lifted his sleeve to cover his mouth and coughed a few times. A familiar taste welled up in his throat. Nie Liang was shocked, but his expression did not change. Under the cover of his wide sleeve, he wiped the filth he coughed up with a handkerchief. Ever since he knew that his body was getting worse, he no longer wore bright and youthful clothes. He changed from indigo, cyan, and blue to dark brown, black, or black. If he accidentally coughed up blood in front of others, he could at least deceive them. Nie Liang secretly kept the handkerchief. When his fingertips touched the warm filth, a thought suddenly flashed through his mind. He frowned slightly and said, "Her? Could it be?" Fan Chen asked, "Has my lord thought of something?" Wei Dan and Nie Liang had known each other for many years. The two had long reached a certain tacit understanding. Seeing Nie Liang's reaction, Wei Dan seemed to have thought of something. Without waiting for him to speak, Nie Liang said coldly, "Lu Shi has enough troops. It won't be a problem to waste a year and a half, but my body can't be wasted." Fan Chen and Wei Dan felt as if they had been struck by lightning. "My lord." Nie Liang waved his hand and said, "The original plan was to use surprise troops to break through the gate of Zhanjiang Pass in the shortest time possible. Before anything could be done, Lu Shi suddenly sent reinforcements to Zhanjiang Pass. The difficulty of breaking through the pass has increased. If Lu Shi is more cunning and uses delaying tactics, my body." Even though Nie Liang had been hiding his illness, a few of his confidants knew. If they didn't know that Nie Liang would suddenly die one day, there wouldn't even be someone to stand up and stabilize the situation. Wei Dan and Wei Dan immediately said, "My lord is in the prime of his life. He will definitely live to a ripe old age." Nie Liang laughed and said, "I know my body." If Lu Shi has this idea, Sun Wen will have to deal with it carefully. Fan Qin gritted his teeth and said, Sun Wen is someone Lu Shi can use. It's better to kill him and end all troubles. Nie Liang shook his head. Sun Wen couldn't be killed yet. Killing him would easily alert the enemy. Who knew what that lunatic Jiang Pengji would do next? Nie Liang said, there's a change in the plan. Zixuan, send someone to Bianzhou to fetch Dalong. Be discreet. If Nie Liang's body really couldn't take it, the army would definitely be in chaos. Nie Qing could still stabilize the situation here. Most importantly, Nie Qing held the military power in his hands. The Nie clan wouldn't dare to act rashly. Nie Liang thought about it carefully again and found that he didn't miss anything. Then he changed his clothes and asked someone to apply some makeup to enhance his complexion. It was normal for Nie Liang to do so. Moreover, Sun Wen couldn't stare at his face. The meeting this time was less tense, but the atmosphere was more solemn than the last time. Sun Wen returned empty-handed, but he wasn't discouraged. He couldn't take advantage of Nie Liang, but he could deal with others. He returned to the tent and waited for a while. The attendant who escorted Sun Wen wanted to see him. Sun Wen said in a low voice, "How's the investigation going?" The attendant also lowered his voice. "I chatted with the soldiers in the kitchen according to your orders. I really found some clues. In ancient times, being a soldier wasn't an honor. Many soldiers were forced by life to the point where they couldn't live anymore. That's why they became soldiers and went to the battlefield. Even if the Nie clan was rich and overbearing, it was impossible to feed every soldier with military rations. Many people only ate about 50 to 60% full. After a long time, except for the elite troops, many soldiers became sallow and emaciated. The attendants weren't treated as well as Sun Wen. They were arranged near the soldiers and ate the same as ordinary soldiers. They didn't eat their fill at every meal. He followed Sun Wen's instructions and got close to the cooks in the logistics department. While chatting, he found that there were unspoken rules in the logistics department. The logistics department had a lot of money. Many of the soldiers in charge of the cooks could eat until they were fat. The happiest one was Nie Liang's cook. Why was that? The soldier in charge of the logistics department complained, "Look at him. He eats like a pig's brain." The attendant laughed. "He's indeed a little fat." The soldier said, "Hey, isn't it rice to feed people?" The attendant said, "Isn't it the same wheat rice?" The soldier said, "How is that? The rice that the nobles don't eat is eaten by him. That's why he's like a pig's brain." The attendant said, "The nobles have to eat too. How much will be left after eating?" Chapter 1458. Hearing this, Sun Wen's entire body trembled. He quickly reached out and grabbed the attendant's wrist. He asked, "Did he only eat 2 chopsticks at a meal, or only 2 chopsticks at every meal?" If it was the former, it meant that Nie Liang had a bad appetite. If it was the latter, it meant that there was something wrong with Nie Liang's body. This lowly one also tested him, almost every meal. Also, the attendant continued, this lowly one also heard something else. That noble ate very little at every meal, but not a single bowl of medicine was missing. The dregs of the medicine had to be burned and buried secretly. Sun Wen was speechless. "I thought I overestimated Nie Liang, but I underestimated his cautiousness." It was rare to see someone so cautious. If Sun Wen didn't play by the rules, it would have been very difficult to find evidence of Nie Liang's poor health. Sun Wen pondered for a while and ordered the attendant, "Think of a way to secretly get some dregs. The sooner, the better. The more careful, the better." The attendant replied, "This lowly one understands." After the attendant left, Sun Wen shook his sleeves and exhaled a mouthful of turbid air. It's time to find an excuse to leave. It's really hard to stay in this dragon's den. Ever since Sun Wen came to the Nie camp, his life was out of his control. There was a sharp knife on his neck that could take his life at any time. He couldn't show the slightest bit of timidity or nervousness. He had to talk cheerfully to outsiders and be confident to control the situation. It was no different from saying that a day felt like a year. Sun Wen thought of an excuse to leave while patiently waiting for the attendant's news. He didn't show any strange expression. The next day, Fan Chen received the news that Sun Wen was leaving. He raised his eyebrows slightly, not knowing what this shameless old man was up to. After asking in detail, he found out that Sun Wen was really leaving. Fan Chen pretended to be confused. "Sir, you're the envoy representing the Duke of Lanting. You can come and go as you please. Why do you need my master's permission?" Sun Wen smiled on the surface, but he cursed in his heart. If he left without saying a word, Niel Yang's 400 feet long saber would fall on him the moment he ran 3 meters away. The more guilty he was, the more it proved that he had ulterior motives. Adhering to the principle of killing 1,000 wrongdoers, how could Niel Yang let Sun Wen go? Sun Wen said with a smile, "You're wrong. Duke Guangshan is an outstanding person. If the Lord finds out that this old man has disrespected Duke Guangshan, the Lord will definitely reprimand me when we return. This old man has lived for most of his life. Even if I can't say that I'm an expert, I still know the ways of the world. How could I not understand this?" He was very anxious, but on the surface, he looked very relaxed, as if he would leave as soon as Niel Yang let him go. "I feel like old friends with you at first sight. I can't wait to drink with you and talk through the night." Fan Chen probed again. "It's a pity that I'm busy with worldly affairs and don't have a chance to get away. Why don't you stay for a few more days? Could it be that our army did not treat you well and neglected you?" 2 days ago, Sun Wen had treated Nye Ying as his home, but today, he said he wanted to leave. How could it not arouse suspicion? Fan Chen had been ordered to probe Sun Wen, but he had failed to dig out anything useful. Naturally, he wouldn't let this matter rest. Sun Wen had a smile on his lips, but it didn't reach his eyes. He said to Fan Chen, "You and I each serve different masters, right?" Fan Chen nodded and said half-truthfully, "It's a pity. One day, I want to be an official in the same court as Zai Dao." "Perhaps there will be such a day." Sun Wen retorted nonchalantly. He said, "Since we each serve different masters, then you should be clear of this old man's position. Now that I'm still eating the fortune given by the Lord, I'm naturally doing my part. The 2 armies are about to go to war, and this old man's mission as an envoy has been completed. Duke Guangshan's attitude is clear, and it's obviously impossible for him to retreat. Why should this old man stay? Could it be that he would stay in Ying and accidentally injure him when our army attacked?" Sun Wen's reason was beyond Fan Chen's imagination. The latter thought that Sun Wen would find a fancy excuse. Unexpectedly, the other party was so straightforward that Fan Chen had nothing to say in response. Yes, both of them served different masters, and the 2 armies were about to go to war. What was the use of Sun Wen staying in Yang? Fan Chen restrained the stiff smile on his lips and said seriously, "This one will inform the Lord of this matter as soon as possible." Sun Wen cupped his hands and said, "Thank you, thank you." Fan Chen brought the message to Niel Yang, but Niel Yang didn't release him immediately. Instead, he deliberately delayed it for a night and secretly sent people to keep an eye on Sun Wen and his men to see if they had any strange reactions. If they were in a hurry to leave but were detained, there would always be a flaw in their anxiousness. Unexpectedly, Sun Wen kept his composure and didn't reveal any flaws for the entire night. The next day, he did what he was supposed to do and was once again picky about the food in the camp. On the evening of the 3rd day, Niel Yang really didn't find anything and finally let them go. Fan Chen personally led the troops to send them off. Seeing this, Sun Wen's heart turned slightly cold, but he still looked calm and composed without any flaws. Even if you escort a gentleman for 1,000 miles, you'll have to part in the end. Farewell. The surroundings were overgrown with weeds. It was vast and barren, making people feel a chill for no reason. Sun Wen smiled and cupped his hands to bid farewell to Fan Chen. He stepped on the stool and entered the carriage, secretly instructing the coachman. "Walk slowly. There's no need to rush. Send people to keep an eye on the people behind." Fan Chen brought 500 soldiers, each riding a warhorse. It wouldn't take long to catch up with them. If Sun Wen hurriedly drove the carriage away, Fan Chen would catch up with him with his men and kill him on the spot. Even without lifting the curtain of the carriage to look back, Sun Wen could feel a pair of scorching eyes locked on him. He raised his hand to touch his chest. Not only could he feel a strong and active heartbeat, but he could also feel a small bump. The attendants had secretly obtained some medicinal dregs by bribing the kitchen soldiers. Sun Wen didn't dare to put the dregs in his carry-on luggage. Instead, he wrapped it up and stuffed it into the inner lining of his shirt. He noticed that someone had secretly touched their luggage last night and the night before. Even though he was very cautious, Sun Wen still found some clues and became even more nervous. "Advisor, they're still following." Sun Wen's heart skipped a beat. He asked, "How?" The coachman said, "They stop and walk. It doesn't look like they're going to kill anyone." Sun Wen said, "Pass down the order. Don't act rashly. Just pretend that they don't exist and move forward at this speed." Although he said so, the enemies behind them were like the black and white impermanents holding the soul-binding chains, floating quietly beside them. Who wouldn't be nervous? After following them for a quarter of an hour, Fan Chen found that Sun Wen was still able to keep his composure. Most of his doubts disappeared. "Let's go back." Fan Chen sighed. "If we're fated, we'll meet again." He covered up the fact that he followed Sun Wen and planned to kill him with a cloth. He didn't want to kill Sun Wen. He just couldn't bear to part with his good friend, which was why he kept stopping and seeing him off. "Go!" Fan Chen turned his head back to take a look, then unwillingly turned his horse around. Chapter 1459. Bai Ning was the one who came to help Sun Wen. Although Bai Ning was a warrior recommended by Wei Ci, he had started accumulating military merits from the bottom of the military camp. Now, he had made a name for himself. He was appointed to help Sun Wen, which showed Jiang Pingji's trust in him. Counselor, Bai Ning had been waiting there every day. Today, he finally saw a figure on the horizon. His nerves immediately tensed up. When they got closer, the scouts confirmed that they were Sun Wen's men and hurried forward to welcome them. Sun Wen's face was pale, and his forehead was sweating. He felt relieved when he saw Bai Ning. "Where is the Lord now?" Sun Wen stepped on the stool and realized that his legs were weak. His shirt was drenched in sweat. He could not help but smile bitterly. He was old and could not take fright. After the confrontation, his heart was in his throat. He was sweating all over, but he finally calmed down. "The Lord is discussing in the tent." Bai Ning saw that he did not look well and said, "Counselor, why don't you rest for a while? You look." Sun Wen was an old man in his 50s. Even though he ate black sesame every day to maintain his health, most of his hair had turned gray. The wrinkles on his face were getting deeper and deeper. After the shock, his face was as pale as a sheet. He looked very scary, as if he would faint in the next second. "No, I can still hold on. General, you don't have to be so careful." Sun Wen rested for a while before his weak legs regained their strength. Looking at the familiar flag fluttering in the sky above the camp, an emotion called peace gradually welled up in his heart. Sun Wen took a deep breath, shook his long sleeves, and returned to his usual appearance. "Grandfather." Before entering the commander's tent, Sun Wen heard his grandson Lan Lan's voice. He looked in the direction of the voice and saw that his grandson, who had become much darker, smiled at him. "Why you here?" Sun Wen frowned. Although he spoiled his grandson, he knew the situation. This was the military camp. To Sun Lan, too much spoiling and care was definitely not love, but harm. Sun Lan stepped forward and bowed to Sun Wen and Bai Ning. He smiled and said, "I'm working here." Because of their age, Jiang Pingji threw Sun Lan and Feng Yi to deal with trivial matters. Although they were all trivial matters, they could also be used to train them. It was the first time for these two young gentlemen, who had grown up in a honeypot, to experience the battlefield. Sun Wen said with a straight face, "How can there be grandfathers and grandsons here? Only the subordinates of the higher-ups are left." Sun Lan's little face fell, and she gave a pitiful, "Oh." "What's in your arms?" Sun Wen asked. Sun Lan said, "I've just sorted out the military affairs to send to the Lord for review." The corner of Sun Wen's mouth twitched. It took him quite a while to restrain the urge to give his grandson a piece of candy. "Hurry up and go." Sun Wen said, "Since it's a military matter, it must be sent to the Lord's desk as soon as possible, no matter how urgent it is." Sun Lan had never seen such a stern grandfather before and was immediately intimidated. She hugged the stack of documents in her arms and jogged to the commander's tent. Sun Wen gritted his teeth and said resentfully, "This kid, fortunately, it was just an ordinary military matter. If it was a major military matter, this brat would have committed a grave mistake." Bai Ning said, "Why are you so angry, counselor? This general has heard that the previous lord also praised Sun Xiao Langjun and Feng Delang. Although the two of them are young, they are very disciplined in handling matters. If they train for a few years, they will definitely become capable officials." Sun Wen said, "Capable officials? Capable officials are not cabbages sold on the street. Lan Lan is still far from that." Bai Ning smiled and said nothing. The two entered the tent one after the other. Jiang Pingji was indeed in a meeting. Sun Lan was sitting in a corner and listening carefully. Feng Zhen's son, Feng Yi, was sitting in a corner behind Jiang Pingji and was recording something. Feng Yi was recording the contents of the meeting, such as who said what. He did not need to miss a word, but he could not deviate from the original meaning. Sun Wen stepped forward and bowed. "Greetings, my lord. I was fortunate enough to not disappoint you and have returned with important evidence." Jiang Pingji naturally remembered why Sun Wen had gone to the Nye camp. She hurriedly asked, "What's the result?" Sun Wen took out a small bag of medicinal dregs and said, "According to my many investigations, Nye Liang's body is already like an arrow at the end of its flight. He eats less than half of a normal person's 3 meals a day. Apart from that, he must drink a bowl of medicine every meal. This is the dregs after the medicine is brewed. How much is half of a normal person's diet? A normal man needs to eat 1.5 to 2 caddies a day. The elites in the military camp eat even more to ensure their body's nutritional needs. According to the standards of the audience in the streaming room, this amount is enough for each meal. What they don't know is that most people in the military camp eat wheat rice to satisfy their hunger. There are very few side dishes, so the proportion of staple food is high. According to Nye Liang's eating standards, even if he is healthy, he will get sick. Among the people in the camp, only Wei Ci was proficient in pharmacology. He took the medicinal dregs from Sun Wen and sniffed them. After a while, he pinched a little and put it in his mouth to try. Wei Ci had been weak and sickly since he was a child. He could not live without medicine. After he grew up, he also needed to take care of his body with traditional Chinese medicine. His tongue was extremely sensitive. He could tell which medicine was in the dregs with just a little taste. Wei Ci borrowed a pen and ink to copy the medicine in the dregs and passed it to everyone. The medicine is fierce and the dosage is extremely heavy. If it is for treatment, taking it a few times is enough. However, it is said that it is to prolong his life with strong medicine. Wei Ci said calmly, "From this, it seems that Nye Liang's health is not optimistic." Qiguan Rang did not understand pharmacology, but he knew that there were a few medicines that would not appear in the regular prescriptions because the medicine was too fierce. Qiguan Rang was well aware of what it meant once the doctor prescribed these medicines. "Zixiao, in your opinion, how long does Nye Liang have to live?" Jiang Pingji glanced at it and put the paper aside. Wei Ci said, "Half a year. He needs to rest and recuperate. It is not advisable to think too much and not to be overjoyed or angry, otherwise. It is not advisable to think too much and not to be overjoyed or angry." Jiang Pingji curled her thin lips and said with a smile, "This seems a little difficult." Wei Ci pursed his lips and did not speak. "Oh Shiji, I've confirmed it with your eyes. He is not someone to be trifled with." Hurenren, sinister face. The streamer is clearly telling others that she wants Nye Liang to think too much and be overjoyed or angry. Tong Meng, being angry is enough. It is impossible for him to be overjoyed. How can the streamer be so kind and let him be overjoyed? Looking at this scene, many of the salted fish faintly had the illusion of taking the side of the evildoer. Blue drawer. Every time I see the streamer smile like a villain, I suspect that she is actually a villain and does not leave the protagonist a way out. Chapter 1460. Jiang Pingji glanced at the bullet screen and found it funny. Not to mention carrying crystals, even if she carried spring water, she could still defeat the so-called protagonist. Zidao is convinced that Niel Yang will die soon, so let's discuss how to make him overthink and shocked and angry. Jiang Pingji said with a smile. Feng Yi, who was taking notes, shook his wrist. The ink on the tip of his pen dripped onto the paper, forming black spots. Do I have to record this too? Feng Yi's expression showed that he was struggling. Seeing that his uncle was used to it, he chose to record it truthfully after some hesitation. If this content was passed down to future generations, his lord's noble image would be destroyed. He might even be labeled as sinister and cunning. Feng Yi's pen flew as he carefully recorded everyone's words and expressions. The more he listened, the more puzzled he became. When the meeting came to an end, Feng Yi privately asked Qiguan Rang, "Military counselor, there's something I'm not clear about." Before Feng Yi went with the army, Feng Zhen secretly asked Qiguan Rang to take care of him. He also told Feng Yi that if there was anything he didn't understand, he could ask Qiguan Rang for help. Feng Yi naturally wouldn't waste this opportunity. Qiguan Rang gently waved his jade fan and opened his eyes slightly. He asked, "What is it that you don't understand?" Since Niel Yang doesn't have much time left, why don't our army defend Zhanjiang Pass and delay for half a year? Feng Yi was puzzled. Just now, from what my lord said, it's clear that you want to gather the army and take the initiative to confront the Nie family. Won't our army suffer great losses? Qiguan Rang said, "Your idea is correct, but you forgot to consider the internal situation of the Nie family." When Feng Yi heard this, he quickly put on a posture of listening attentively. In an instant, his eyes lit up. Qiguan Rang said, "After Zhongzhou was destroyed, the Nie family recruited troops at the fastest speed. They stabilized the situation while using their connections and prestige to recruit talents and families for their own use. However, not everyone was wholeheartedly convinced by the Nie clan. A considerable number of people follow the crowd. They have other thoughts in their hearts, but the Nie family is powerful and they have no choice but to rely on it. To put it bluntly, the Nie family's internal forces are messy and the people are not united. If Niel Yang dies suddenly and the front line loses, the Nie family will inevitably have internal strife and fall apart. To make an analogy, the Nie family was a magnet that forcibly absorbed the metal fragments around it. Once the magnetic force was gone, wouldn't those metal fragments be free? The longer Niel Yang lives, the more stable the Nie family will be. He will also have more time to pave the way for his successor. Even if he suddenly dies, his successor can stabilize the situation, which is extremely disadvantageous to our army. Qiguan Rang continued, "If our army defends Zhanjiang Pass to the death, the morale of the Nie army will not be affected and will remain high. Even if Niel Yang suddenly dies, they will be able to survive for a while by relying on this morale." Feng Yi tried her best to listen, slowly sorting out her thoughts. "What you mean is that the Nie clan is currently in a state of crisis. Once Niel Yang dies, the morale of the Nie army will plummet, and the forces in the rear will also be in turmoil. The large and small forces that were originally attached to the Nie clan will become disloyal. If it can be broken into pieces, my lord will be able to lead the army to nibble away at it one by one?" Qiguan Rang laughed. "That's about it." Feng Yi's guess was confirmed, and a bold idea popped into her mind. My lord intends to use this opportunity to enter Zhongzhou? Not only did he want to swallow Yang Tao and beat In Chui to death, but he also wanted to get a piece of the cake that was the Nie family of Zhongzhou? That will happen sooner or later. Qiguan Rang's expression was indifferent. It was impossible to tell whether he was happy or angry. He said, "If the Nie clan can be broken into pieces in one fell swoop, then taking over most of Zhongzhou will be as easy as pie." My lord changed his mind at the last minute because of this idea. Feng Yi instantly understood and bowed to Qiguan Rang in thanks. "Thank you for clearing up my doubts, my military advisor." Qiguan Rang showed a rare smile. He said, "You are more sensible than your father." Feng Zhen acted like a big boss when asking for help. He wasn't as sensible as his son. Sun Wen returned to the headquarters without any mishap. The two armies were facing each other with Zhanjiang Pass as the boundary. The atmosphere was tense. At the same time, in the territory of the Nie clan in Bian Prefecture. Yang, let me tell you a piece of good news. Father has allowed me to go to the battlefield. Nie Qing had thought that he could only squat in the rear to handle trifling matters. He didn't expect that his father's messenger would come to pick him up. Ever since he was young, Nie Qing had always looked up to his father, Nie Liang, as a role model. He hoped to gain his father's approval and praise. Unfortunately, his aptitude was poor and he couldn't reach his father's standards. This time, Nie Liang had led the troops into battle, but Nie Qing had been ordered to stay in the rear to hold the fort. He had been disappointed for a while. When Nie Yang heard this, he suddenly opened his slightly narrowed eyes, a look of shock and horror on his face. Why did uncle suddenly change his mind? Didn't he just tell you to guard the rear? Although Nie Yang asked this, his mind was spinning in circles. Calling Nie Qing to the front lines at this time naturally wasn't because Nie Qing was capable. It was most likely because Nie Liang's health wasn't good. If anything happened to Nie Liang on the battlefield, Nie Qing could stabilize the situation as the heir and take over military power. With a thought, Nie Yang understood the intention of Nie Liang's action. Nie Qing said, "Father must have his reasons for doing this." Nie Yang cupped his hands and smiled. Then, little brother will congratulate elder cousin and wait for your triumphant return. Nie Qing said, "There's no need to wait for my triumphant return. You can come with me." Nie Yang was shocked and said embarrassedly, "Uncle wants you to go. It's not good for little brother to go as well." Nie Qing said, "Why not? I could somewhat guess my father's intentions. If the situation is really that bad, it'll be dangerous for Yang to stay here. Why don't you come with me to the front lines? Although I can't compare to father, I can still protect you." If something happened to Nie Liang, there would be a lot of internal strife in the Nie family. Nie Yang was usually close to him. If he stayed on the family land, he might be mistakenly killed as his trusted aide. After thinking about it, it was safest to bring Nie Yang with him. At the very least, there were more than 200,000 soldiers at the front lines. As long as he had military power, those thieves would have to think twice before making a move. Nie Yang was silent for a while. He was moved. "Thank you, elder cousin." At this time, the system laughed coldly. Nie Qing and Nie Liang aren't here, so you can make a move. If you go to the front lines with Nie Qing, what will happen to the big and small forces you've secretly recruited? Nie Yang was too egoistic. He changed plans without any discussion. The system hated the feeling of being out of control. Nie Yang laughed coldly. The older he grew, the more he felt that this thing was a hindrance. Say, if Nie Liang and Nie Qing both die on the battlefield, who will be the only one who can stand up and stabilize the situation? Chapter 1461. Fortunately, the Lord loves to repair roads. Otherwise, this batch of supplies would only arrive a few days later. Knowing that the first batch of supplies had arrived at the front line, Feng Zhen and the others hurriedly sent people to receive them. They were busy counting the supplies and checking the accounts. After confirming that there was no mistake, the crowd heaved a sigh of relief. His lord was capricious and changed her mind at the last minute. This caused the frontline defense equipment to be insufficient. Once they adopted a defensive formation, they would definitely suffer a great loss. Feng Zhen and the others had been on tenterhooks for a few days, afraid that the enemy would find out what was going on. They hadn't slept well at all. Now that their supplies had arrived, they were more confident. A faint smile appeared on Yang Xi's haggard face. He said, "My lord always says, if you want to be rich, you have to build roads first." Her words are crude, but the truth is not. Usually, there was no war to fight, and the flat roads were convenient for the people to travel. Once the war started, the rations would be able to reach the front lines faster than the soldiers. This was extremely important to the front line, which was constantly changing. After settling the matter of returning the supplies to the warehouse, Fu Wang gathered everyone to discuss countermeasures. Zhangzhou was Yang Tao's base camp. The waterways here were developed, Thus it would be extremely difficult for outsiders, who were not familiar with the terrain, to attack. Of course, if one wasn't good at water battles, even if one was familiar with the land and waterways, one wouldn't be able to gain the upper hand. Fengzhen said, "Our Lord is also an expert in preparing for a rainy day. He poached Qi Kuang from Yang Jian long ago. Otherwise, this battle would not have been easy to fight." During the alliance meeting at Huangshui, Fengzhen had recommended Qi Kuang to Jiang Pingji. Since she couldn't directly ask Yang Jian for Qi Kuang, she used the excuse of borrowing someone to watch the show to borrow Qi Kuang. Until now, she had no intention of returning him. Qi Kuang trained the navy diligently for Jiang Pingji for many years. As a man of action, Qi Kuang only knew how to bury his head in training and never claimed credit. He didn't disappoint the Lord's trust in him, so he didn't have much of a presence these past few years. However, this couldn't erase Qi Kuang's contributions. His efforts over the years were also valuable. If it wasn't for him, they wouldn't have won the battle against the northern borderline so easily, let alone establishing their position as the overlord of the north. Moreover, they were in Zhangzhou where the water was developed, so water battles were inevitable. If a group of landlubbers were to fight in the water, it would be the same as sending their heads to the enemy. What was the point of fighting? Even if they sharpened their blades just before the battle, the casualties would still be very heavy. Yang Si smiled and said, "I don't agree with other things, but I have to admit this." Qi Kuang replied humbly. He didn't think that this could be considered his own contribution. If it wasn't for his lord's trust and support over the years, he wouldn't be where he was today. Most of Jiang Pingji's territory was in the north. There was almost no need for water battles. Training the navy was also a waste of time and energy. The navy was not easy to train, and the amount of effort and cost was unimaginable to outsiders. Qi Kuang knew very well that there were people who had long been dissatisfied with the navy, thinking that the useless navy took up too much military resources. This is the credit of the Lord and the entire army. How can I be the only one to blame for this? Qi Kuang smiled shyly, then he changed the topic and said, "The waterways in Zhangzhou are well developed. In the past, water bandits ran amok, but Yang Jian led his men to clean them up, so they stopped for a while. After that, the world was in chaos, and the number of pirates only increased. Yang Tao's energy was mainly focused on Nanxing, so he reckoned that he would not be able to put in all his forces to deal with the water bandits in Zhangzhou. I have an idea, but I'm not sure if it's feasible." Fu Wang said, "Why don't you share it so that the military advisors can help you analyze it?" Qi Kuang said, "Although I'm from Zhangzhou and my ancestors have dealt with the water for generations, I'm not as familiar with it as the pirates. If Yang Tao can't completely subdue them, we might as well send some navy to capture some of them and find out the situation in the water from them. In some places, the water was deep and the current was rapid. In some places, the water was shallow and it was easy to hit the rocks." Even though Qi Kuang had grown up by the water, he didn't dare to say that he knew every part of the water in Zhangzhou. He had experience in water battles. In the past, he had followed Yang Jian in hundreds of water battles, big and small, and he had a set of experience in dealing with the pirates. If he sent the navy to capture the pirates, it wouldn't take much effort. Fu Wang and the others agreed to this suggestion. They had the great universal geographical map, but the map was extremely simple. The water was also a few rough lines. If they were to really fight with Yang Tao, this kind of map wouldn't be of much use. If they could find some pirates who knew their background, they wouldn't have to worry about not being able to figure out the water route. Of course, it would be even better if he could subdue all of the water bandits. More than half a month before the war broke out, Yang Tao had been praying for Yan Lin's return. "How's the preparation going?" Yan Lin had just returned. He didn't even have time to change his clothes. He immediately went to Yang Tao to ask about the situation. Before he went to Zhongzhou, he prepared a backup, external brain for Yang Tao. It was a strategist named Qian Su. Qian Su and Yan Lin were good friends when they were young. They shared the same interests and had kept in touch all these years. Years ago, Yan Lin helped Yang Tao seize power from the fake emperor, Prince Changshu. If it wasn't for Qian Su, who secretly supported him and used his family's power to help him, he wouldn't have succeeded. During Yan Lin's absence, Qiansu assisted Yang Tao in managing the internal affairs of the company. She also made sure that the logistics and war preparations were perfect. "Everything is ready," Qiansu said. "Xiaoyang, do you want to check it out?" "How can I not trust you?" Yan Lin said. "What's my lord's attitude towards this war?" Qiansu said, "My lord is enthusiastic about the war, but those people under him have other intentions." The structure of Yang Tao's subordinates was complicated. Some of them were old men from Zhangzhou, while others were from Nanxing. Compared to the former, who were loyal, the latter were more like opportunists. They saw that Jiang Pengji was powerful. She sent more than 200,000 elites to the border. They were scared before the war even started. Their fighting spirit was low. Qiansu had been worrying about this for the past few days. Yan Lin said, "I expected it." Those people didn't care whether Yang Tao won or lost. They only cared about their own interests. Qiansu said, "What do you think about the outcome of this war, Xiaoyang?" Yan Lin answered without hesitation, "My army is at a disadvantage, but it won't be easy for Lu Shi to win." Yang Tao's troops had suffered too many losses on the battlefield in Nanxing. His supplies and rations were almost depleted. Before he could catch his breath, Jiang Pengji had sent troops to suppress him. The situation was very disadvantageous to him. However, Yan Lin didn't think that Yang Tao would lose because of these disadvantages. Zhangzhou's terrain was special. The water ran through the whole territory. If they wanted to conquer this place, they had to fight in the water. Qiansu said, "Yes, most of Lu Shi's troops are northerners. They're not good at swimming." Yan Lin smiled bitterly and said, "That's not necessarily true." "What do you mean?" Yan Lin said, "I'm afraid you don't know this. During the alliance meeting at the Huang River, Lu Shi used the excuse of borrowing a centurion from the old lord. The centurion was inconspicuous, but after observing him for a long time, Yan Lin realized that he was quite talented. He could be put in an important position when the time was right. Unexpectedly, he was borrowed and hasn't been returned. Chapter 1462. The Navy can't be trained in 2 or 3 years. There are few waters in the north. The difference between a small river and a big river is huge. Qiansu was quite optimistic about this. A group of soldiers training in a small river can at most learn how to swim. How can they fight like a navy? There was a huge difference between water battles and land battles. The training ground was different, and so were the training results. Most of Jiang Pengji's territory was in the north. Although there were big rivers in the north, most of them were rapid and not wide enough to train the navy. No matter how capable Qi Kuang was, would he be able to train a qualified navy under the circumstances where he lacked facilities? Yan Lin said, "That's what I thought, but after studying the battles that Lu Shi has experienced over the years, I feel that the world has underestimated her." The most typical example is the battle at the Yi River in the north borderline. The north borderline was originally a vast grassland. There were also the Gobi, glaciers, swamps, and deserts. Logically speaking, it was the best place for cavalry to fight. It should have been the home ground for the north borderline. However, the first battle between the north borderline and Lu Shi was a water battle. Although the inside story of the water battle was complicated, it couldn't hide the humor in it. It should have been the home ground for the cavalry to charge at each other, but it turned out to be a jaw-dropping water battle. The Yi River is 5 miles wide. If we train the Navy here, it won't be as effective as training on a river, but it's not that bad. The Yi River was the largest river in the north borderline. It originated from the far north and crossed the entire north borderline. There were many tributaries that fed countless people in the north borderline. Although Yan Lin hadn't seen the Yi River in its entirety, he could imagine it. It should be the best place to train the Navy. Qiansu frowned again when he heard that. If Lu Shi can even make up for this weakness, then her Navy. Qiansu couldn't come to a conclusion, but he could guess that Jiang Pengji's Navy was not a paper tiger. Not only did they have the advantage in numbers, but they also had the ability to fight. What are the chances of our army winning? He remembered correctly that Wang Lin had said that Yang Tao had a chance of winning. Navy battles are different from ordinary soldiers. Not only do they need a long period of training, but they also need to accumulate a certain amount of battle experience. When Lu Shi was fighting in the north, he had only fought on the water once or twice. The Navy was very inexperienced. The waters of Zhangzhou are complicated. They've just arrived, so they don't know anything about the water routes, weather changes, and river conditions. Wang Lin lowered his eyes and said, "We might have a chance of winning if we add in a good reason." Qian Su trusted Wang Lin, so she was more confident after hearing his words. However, if Zhangzhou is accidentally lost? Qian Su asked a very unpleasant question. Wang Lin said, if Zhangzhou falls, Lu Shi will be able to bring his troops down the river and attack Nanxing. Do we even need to talk about the result? If they lost the battle in Zhangzhou, it would not be easy for Yang Tao to make a comeback. After all, Jiang Pingji wasn't the only enemy who coveted them. There was also the treacherous Sun Chui. There was Jiang Pingji, the ferocious tiger, in front of him, and Sun Chui, the hungry wolf, behind him. Yang Tao was a pitiful person with a sandwiched heart. While everyone else was confused and worried about their future, Yang Tao ate, drank, and slept well. His daily routine was to wake up, get dressed, wash up, eat, watch the Navy's training, deal with official documents, and be busy until the moon was high in the sky. Then he would go home to eat and play with his wife and son. Yan Shuxian had a belly full of worries, but when she saw her husband doing what he was supposed to do, she suddenly felt powerless, as if she had punched cotton. What are you worried about? Your husband won't be unable to protect you and your son. Yang Tao turned sideways to face her. Between the two of them was the babbling baby. The child grew up very quickly. He was fair, plump, and good-natured. He smiled when he met people. It was Yang Tao's first time being a father, so it was naturally refreshing. Yan Shuxian said, "I'm not worried about this. As long as I'm with you, it doesn't matter whether it's the world of the living or the underworld. Don't say such inauspicious things. The child has weak yang energy. Be careful not to provoke unclean things." Yang Tao made a few childish sounds and said, "But your husband has strong yang energy. Why don't you come closer? Don't worry about evil things, they can't come close to you and your son." Yan Shuxian was speechless. Yang Tao played with the baby for a while, then let out a long sigh and said, "Although you and Xiaoyang didn't say it, your husband knows very well. If we hadn't joined the Nanxing alliance to fight against the 4 factions of Nanman, we wouldn't have to be afraid of Lu Shi. Now that our strength has been greatly damaged, it's hard to predict our chances of winning." He knew very well, but he was the lord and the backbone of everyone. He couldn't be afraid of a battle. In today's world, one couldn't withdraw just because one didn't want to fight. Yang Tao not only had to be responsible for himself and the people under his rule, but he also had to be responsible for those who had followed him loyally. They didn't want to admit defeat, so Yang Tao couldn't have such thoughts. Yan Shuxian was stunned, and her expression was complicated. "What do you think, my husband?" Yang Tao said, "What else can I think? Let's fight. Whether we win or lose, it doesn't matter. Whether we win or lose, we just have to give it our all." He was a generous person, and he didn't have a strong obsession with winning or losing. If it wasn't for Wang Lin's support, he wouldn't have gotten to where he was today. "In the past, my dream was to be a knight-errant who would help the weak and punish evil." Yang Tao said calmly, "After my father passed away, I had no one to rely on. That's when I realized how childish I was. Fortunately, I wasn't alone. I had Xiaoyang to support me. After I got rid of the fake emperor and avenged my father, I had an idea. I can let anyone down, but Xiaoyang can't be disappointed." As long as Wang Lin still wanted to work hard, Yang Tao wouldn't give in even if he had to sacrifice his life. Yan Shuxian said, "My husband and big brother's friendship is enviable. In any case, we grew up together in open crotch pants. He risked his life for me. How can I let him down?" Yang Tao smiled. "Now that I have the two of you, your husband will try his best to arrange a way out for the two of you." Yan Shuxian sighed softly and didn't say anything. She hugged the child in her arms tightly and leaned against his chest. She wanted to be optimistic, but she couldn't help but think too much about the current situation. Even though Yang Tao said he would protect her and the child, she didn't think life would be interesting without him. For a loving couple, it took a lot of courage to live after losing the other half. The next day, Yang Tao woke up on time when the sky was just starting to brighten. He got up carefully and touched the baby's diaper. He found that the baby had wet the bed. He hurriedly asked the maid to bring him clean water and a towel. The baby had a bad temper. He would cry whenever he felt uncomfortable. The nanny couldn't calm him down no matter how hard she tried. Only his mother would comfort him. In order to let his wife sleep a little longer, Yang Tao could only sleep lightly. He woke up at night and peed the baby. As a father, I guess that's how I feel. He hoped that he could find a stable place for the child to grow up. Chapter 1463. The waters of Zhangzhou were crisscrossed, and water bandits ran amok all around. The local people suffered greatly. When Yang Jian was still around, all the water bandits' strongholds in Zhangzhou had been raided by him. Every time, he would take the lead and beat the water bandits until they cried for their parents. Who knew how many people he had helped escape from the bandits' persecution? Because of this, Yang Jian's reputation in Zhangzhou was extremely high. After he was killed by Zhao Xiao, thousands of people mourned for him. Yang Tao was able to firmly occupy Zhangzhou, remove the fake emperor, and lead a group of loyal officials to Nanxing. His father, Yang Jian, played a huge role. When Yang Jian died, some people felt sad and regretful, but there were also people who celebrated and applauded. These people were not only Yang Jian's political enemies, but also the water bandits he had suppressed. The water bandits near the Zhangzhou watershed were not simple bandits. Some were forced to become bandits, but most were hereditary. Their ancestors were water bandits who kidnapped women to be their wives and forced them to give birth to children. When the children grew up, they inherited their father's occupation, raiding houses, robbing merchant ships, oppressing the people, and kidnapping women to give birth to their children. Because the number of water bandits increased, they were emboldened. At their peak, they even colluded with the local government. The prefectural officials secretly enjoyed the water bandits' tributes and turned a blind eye to their actions. Some officials and soldiers who accepted bribes would even leak information to the water bandits. After a few generations, the water bandits had become a malignant tumor attached to Zhangzhou. Yang Jian was an upright person who could not tolerate anything, so he did not care about their tributes or bribes. In his life, he had fought hundreds of battles, big and small, and destroyed hundreds of water bandits. The number of water bandits that died under his blade was uncountable. Some water bandits were stubborn, and the weeds on their graves were 2 meters tall. Others admired Yang Jian and were convinced by him. They willingly became his subordinates and fought with him. Yang Si sat on the deck and sighed. It's such a pity that such a good man died in the hands of a villain like Zhao Xiao. Mountains rose and fell on both sides of the river, and the mountains were filled with mist. The river wind blew, filling his wide sleeves and messing up his hair. For some reason, he felt like he was ascending to immortality. He stretched comfortably, looking as if he was enjoying himself, but his words carried a hint of malice. Zhao Xiao, that despicable man. I let him off easy back then, Yang Si said. If it weren't for him, a good man like Yang Jian wouldn't have died in vain. Be it in troubled times or prosperous times, people like Yang Jian were always worthy of praise. Senior Yang Jian is indeed a hero. Li Yun nodded in agreement. He said, "It's a pity that we were not fated to meet. We only met a few times back then." Li Yun and Yang Si were dressed in luxurious clothes. The latter looked like a pampered gentleman who was ignorant of worldly affairs, while the former looked like a comfortable and wealthy master of a wealthy family. The reason they were acting like this was naturally to act as bait for the nearby water bandits to rob them. It was just that the pirates in the nearby waters were elusive and did not make any movements. Since they were bored, they pestered Qi Kuang to tell them about the famous people in Zhangzhou to kill time. Qi Kuang's favorite idol was his former boss, Yang Jian. He looked at Yang Jian with a 1-meter thick filter. He started from the story of the other party's youth and talked non-stop for 2 hours. Because of this, Yang Si and Li Yun sighed with emotion. To lure the water bandits into the trap, Li Yun and the rest disguised themselves as a team of businessmen. Afraid that the water bandits would not be well informed or would not take the bait, they even spread the news that they would bring 100,000 don of rations to Zhangzhou to be sold at a high price, earning a windfall from war. Some of the water bandits who talked about righteous bandits and thieves have their own principles hated these kinds of businessmen the most. They would rob them every time they came, and it was easy for them to take the bait. At first, Li Yun was confused. He did not know the deeper meaning behind Qi Kuang's arrangement. Will they really take the bait? 100,000 don of rations is 100,000 don of rations. Why is there a need to emphasize shipping to Zhangzhou to be sold at a high price? Yang Si clicked his tongue and sneered. Han Mei, you don't understand. Even if they are water bandits, they are still human. Who doesn't care about their reputation? There is no profit to be made from robbing ordinary people, and they will even be scolded. There is no burden when robbing unscrupulous businessmen. Instead, they will feel that they are heroes who got rid of evil for the people. Those righteous bandits love to target merchants who are rich but have a bad reputation. They will earn a good reputation. When he said this, Li Yun understood. However, bandits are bandits. No matter what the person who was robbed did, it is a crime for bandits to rob things that do not belong to them. Would a group of bandits think that they are getting rid of evil for the people? Li Yun's brows furrowed so tightly that they could squash mosquitoes. No matter how many excuses they have, it is just a cover. Yang Si laughed heartily. Han Mei is right to think that way, but ordinary people are easy to deceive. Qi Kuang echoed, the military advisor is right. There are indeed many self-proclaimed righteous bandits in the Zhangzhou River Basin. They specialize in robbing rich merchants and boast that they are robbing the rich to help the poor. They protect the local fishermen from being harmed by other bandits, so the fishermen who receive their kindness regard them as heroes. What's more, some fishermen take the initiative to inform the water bandits or erect longevity tablets in their homes to worship them. Li Yun shook his head. This is really strange. The people are too easy to deceive. Yang Si said, Han Mei, this story teaches us a principle. Guess what it is? Li Yun frowned and thought for a while, then said uncertainly, reputation? Yang Si smiled and clapped his hands. Yes, no matter what you do, you must use the tiger skin of a good reputation. As long as this reputation is strong enough, even if you commit murder, arson, rape, and plunder, the people will feel that what you did was right and good. They will applaud and cheer for you. Li Yun said, Teacher, you are teaching bad people. Yang Si smiled and said, Teaching bad people? Is it my turn to teach this? Turn your head and look at our Lord. This is what an expert should be like. When had his Lord not done the same thing when she did something bad? Li Yun's expression darkened. How can we talk about the Lord behind her back? Yang Si waved his hand. Even if the Lord heard it, she wouldn't have any objections. At this moment, Li Yun's sharp ears caught a sentence. No, she has a lot of objections. Li Yun roared, Who's hiding there? Oh my God, I've been discovered. Li Yun stood up abruptly and kicked open the door that was blocking his way. He grabbed the back of the collar like he was holding a cat and pulled out the person hiding behind. Warrior, you have great arm strength. It was obvious that he had been caught red-handed, but not only did the person not feel guilty, he even applauded Li Yun. The little angel, Han Mei, was indeed an excellent man. His arm strength was enviable. He could lift a person weighing more than 100 kilograms just like that. Yang Si burst out laughing when he heard this. Li Yun blushed. Although Qi Kuang did not laugh, there was a hint of a smile in his eyes. Chapter 1464. The one caught by Li Yun was a fisherman's daughter. Her looks could only be said to be delicate and pretty, but her eyes were extremely lively and full of spirit. Li Yun and the rest pretended to be merchants, but they could not use warships. They could only spend money to borrow a civilian boat from the nearby fishermen. They also borrowed a few fishermen who had been fishing nearby for generations to lead the way. In order to prevent the fishermen from leaking the news, they did not tell them their true identities. This woman was eavesdropping from the boat. Li Yun was annoyed and increased the strength of his grip. Ouch, 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 Angel Han Mei, please spare my dog life. I've been your fan for 6 years. The fisherwoman was in so much pain that tears flowed out of her eyes, but these words sounded like this to everyone else. Ouch, 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 little angel beep beep, spare my dog life. At least let the baby bleep 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 bleep. Li Yun, he didn't use much strength, did he? What dialect are you speaking? Li Yun did not know what a silencer was, but he did not sense any malice from the fisherwoman. Instead, there was a strange sense of intimacy. The fisherwoman said, Can you let me go first? If you're afraid that I'll jump into the water and escape, why don't you tie me up with a rope? Li Yun, Xianxia asked, Do you really want to be tied up? The fisherwoman said, It's Han Mei's binding play. These words were silenced when they reached the ears of the crowd. Other than beep beep, there were no other words. This person was undoubtedly the lucky emperor of this round of Dream of 1,000 Years. He was a man on the inside, but on the outside, he was a girl. After she became a fisherman's daughter, she cried for a while. She never expected to see Li Yun, Yang Si, and Qi Kuang. If she was not in the cabin, the fisherwoman really wanted to take off her clothes and run to express her joy. There were so many lucky people in Dream of 1,000 Years, but so far, he was the only one who had truly come into contact with the little angel under the host's account. The living little angel Han Mei, the living little foodie Rong Rong, the living, Qi Kuang didn't really understand, but it was still a pleasant surprise. Because she was lucky, Jiang Pingji clearly heard Yang Si and the others ridiculing her. That was why the fisherwoman muttered, No, she has an opinion, because he saw Jiang Pingji's bullet screen. There were only 4 words. Yang Si hee. Looking at these 4 words, the fisherwoman felt the host's mocking face appear in her mind. Translated, this sentence would go something like this. Yang Si, you single dog still want to get rid of your single status? I'll deal with you when we get back. Even though the fisherwoman posed no threat, Li Yun still used his gaze to ask Yang Si how he should deal with her. Should he kill her or lock her up? The fisherwoman was so happy that she did not notice the exchange between the two of them. Jiang Pingji, on the other hand, understood and signaled the fisherwoman to save herself. Through the screen of the live streaming room, the fisherwoman could treat Li Yun and the others as her idols, but Li Yun did not know that. He would only treat the fisherwoman as a threat and kill her. When she realized this, the fisherwoman shuddered. Li Yun released his shackles. He half knelt on the ground and hugged Li Yun's calf, wailing. Don't kill me, I'm innocent. Warrior, you might not believe me when I say this, but I'm actually a mountain ghost that has become a spirit in the nearby mountains. I've mischievously possessed this body. If you kill me, I won't die, but this pitiful little girl will die. Li Yun wanted to call for people to tie up the fisherwoman and lock her up, but he did not expect to hear these words. Mountain ghost. Li Yun held onto his sword with one hand and guarded against the fisherwoman who was hugging his leg. If he had the slightest intention of harming someone, Li Yun could cut him into 2 in an instant. Yes. The fisherwoman rolled her eyes and immediately said, I'm a mountain ghost that has become a spirit in the mountains. I know many things. Yang Si knew at a glance that she was lying. He frowned slightly. The fisherwoman cried miserably, tears and snot flowing down her face. Her hands that were hugging Li Yun were trembling in fear. She said tearfully, I know many things about building ships. Warrior, do you want to have a go? I'm really not a spy, nor am I anything else. I'm just a mountain ghost. I'm weak and helpless, but I can still eat. Warrior, please spare my life. This European emperor's family built ships. Not only was he wealthy, but he had no interest in inheriting his family until he encountered the live streaming room. In order to chase after his idol and become a big shot in the live streaming room, he changed his habits to learn relevant knowledge. This made his family cry in amazement. After chasing after his idol for so many years, he could not be compared to the old people in the industry, but the knowledge in his head was 10 streets ahead of this era. Xianxia said, "Are all mountain ghosts as weak as you?" The fisherwoman said, "A wise man submits to circumstances. So what if I'm a mountain ghost? Even mountain ghosts are afraid of people." As she spoke, the fisherwoman hugged Li Yun's leg tightly again. She wanted to rub half of her body against him. Li Yun's initial wariness turned into nervousness. Who could stand a strange woman touching his leg? This was harassment. The fisherwoman looked at Li Yun regretfully as he walked to the other side of the deck. "You're not going to kill me?" the fisherwoman asked. The corners of Xia's lips curled up. He said softly, "Not anymore." Not only did the fisherwoman not feel safe, but she also shivered involuntarily. Everyone who watched the live streaming room knew that Xianxia was a deranged black sesame bun. He was the type that killed people without batting an eyelid. The fisherwoman shrank pitifully in a corner and said, "I can prove that I'm a mountain ghost." Xianxia mocked, "How? If I can prove it, will you let me live for more than 12 hours? After 12 hours, I'll leave. Don't make things difficult for me." Xianxia said, "Sure." He wanted to see how this person, who was full of lies, could prove it. As it turned out, she could prove it. She opened her mouth and said a lot of precious shipbuilding knowledge. Some of it was known to Qi Kuang, some were private collections passed down from generation to generation by shipbuilders, but most of the content was beyond the limits of this era. Qi Kuang asked after listening to one part, "Can it be done?" The fisherwoman said, "Of course it can." As her ancestors had dealt with ships for generations, the fisherwoman's house had many precious historical sites. He also looked up information related to naval warfare. These things were very precious to Qi Kuang and the rest. Current naval warfare was still at a more primitive stage. For example, they could use ships to collide with other ships or forcefully board the other party's ship to fight. In ancient naval warfare, the bow and arrow had an irreplaceable position. Archers used arrows to randomly shoot at enemy ships. The arrows would often come into contact with flammable substances and burn the enemy's ship. The advance and retreat of the entire army depended on the boatmen. Because the transmission of information was delayed, the response of the warship was often slower. In the absence of firearms, the quality of the warship directly determined the outcome of naval warfare. A sturdy and huge warship could completely crash and smash the enemy's small, broken boat into pieces. The warship on Jiang Pingji's side was not considered bad, but it was not much better. If the warship was used to collide with the enemy's warship, it would be scrapped after a few hits. However, the fisherwoman's suggestion gave Qi Kuang a different train of thought. Even if it was just a verbal suggestion, Qi Kuang knew that if the fisherwoman's suggestion came to fruition, his army would have a great advantage in the battle on the water, and they would be able to reduce many casualties. Xianxia stood up and bowed to the fisherwoman. The fisherwoman was so scared that her legs turned to jelly. QAQ that you're tuning in to the Wang Lin's Journey YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.